that public comment is not actually usually a part of this. So there are a couple of people I specifically said that they could make public comment, and I don't want to go back on that. But for other people who have public comments, if you would like to submit it as part of the record of council, that would be great. And I really apologize. It's a learning process going on here. So thank you all so much for coming to, for whatever purpose you came, and for those who came to honor Shirley Satterfield. In the words of Princeton's own Albert Hines, it is always the right time to do the right thing. And I'm thrilled to be here tonight doing the right thing by honoring sixth-generation Princetonian Shirley Satterfield. Shirley is an integral part of the fabric of this town and has been a champion in ensuring that all of Princeton's history is commemorated and celebrated. Shirley was educated in Princeton, starting at the Witherspoon School for Colored Children on Quarry Street, and after integration with the Princeton Plan in 1948, the Nassau Street School, and then back to Witherspoon for middle school. Her mother's fierce determination that Shirley get the education that she deserved got her into the academic track at PHS, and Shirley graduated and headed to college in 1954. She did a lot in between the time that she left Princeton and came back, but I'm omitting that in the interest of brevity. After college, Shirley lived out of state for many years, embarking on a long and distinguished career as a teacher and later guidance counselor. When Shirley's daughters reached school age, she returned to Princeton because she knew and understood the value of education and was preparing to do her part to give back to this community. In 1994, as the capstone job in her long career as an educator, Shirley became a guidance counselor at Princeton High School, where she worked until her retirement in 2000, although one can hardly call Shirley retired. During her time at PHS, Shirley founded and worked with groups such as the W.E.B. Du Bois Cultural Awareness Forum and Pulse, Pride, Unity, Leadership, Sisterhood, and Esteem, which promoted educational opportunities and support for Black students. Her colleagues, and I believe a number of them are here tonight, can attest to Shirley's devotion to her students and their deep affection for her. Shirley's impact upon this community and her service to it does not stop at the doors of the school. As her mother was a pillar of their church, Witherspoon Presbyterian, so too is Shirley, singing in the choir and serving as a leader and a deacon. She's written a history of the church and helped organize the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the Presbyterian presence in this town. Shirley joined the board of the Princeton Historical Society in 1990 and helped organize the first exhibit at the Historical Society on Princeton's African American history. Working closely with her history partner, Albert Hines, and with the Witherspoon-Jackson community and Princeton University to document African American life in Princeton over the last 350 plus years. Her walking tours dedicated to Mr. Hines of the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood provide an invaluable perspective about life in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood throughout the history of this town, and especially during the days of segregation. On the tour, Shirley brings to life not only the close-knit, thriving community of Witherspoon-Jackson with its multitude of bustling Black-owned businesses, but also what it was like growing up in a segregated town. She makes it real and she makes it personal. Shirley's commitment to her friend Mr. Hines and her appreciation of the history that he represented is also evident in her spearheading the successful effort to name the plaza in front of the public library after Mr. Hines. Shirley's recent activities include fighting for the designation of the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood as the 20th Historic District, the founding of the Witherspoon-Jackson Historical and Cultural Society, and the Heritage Tour Project. The Heritage Tour Project commemorates 26 sites significant to African American history in Princeton through the placement of historical plaques, with the first 4 plaques celebrating the 4 historic African American churches in town installed this year. Shirley has also served on the board of the YWCA, Princeton Young Achievers, the Princeton Adult School, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Princeton Future, and as a community fellow at Whitman College at Princeton University. And for all these things, Shirley Satterfield, who I'm proud to call my friend, we would like to officially recognize you.
Good evening. To Councilwoman Eve Nagergain, Mayor Liz Lempert, and members of the Princeton Council, I'm humbled and I'm very, very thankful for this recognition. I don't have to say much. I have 2 pages here, but Eve said it all, so I'll just try to do my best with what I have here. I want each of you to know how grateful I am that you're here today for my recognition and for all of your support that you have given me since I've been back home in 1981. My pastor, is my pastor here? Okay. My pastor, Reverend Lukata Njumbe at Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, preached a sermon on the labor of love. As he preached the gospel and acknowledged many who give service through a labor of love, I recounted that all I do is for a labor of love. All the years that I have been a teacher, guidance counselor, my stewardship at my church, my time and energy that I give to the community, the many boards and committees that promote the research, share, and preserve the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, the historic flavor of the town of Princeton, and the organizations that promote social justice and racial literacy. You all know that I grew up in a segregated town. And I recognize this, and I'm very proud of having gone to Witherspoon School for Colored Children, because I had caring teachers. And I remember when they integrated the schools. And I remember when I went to Princeton High School. And when I came back to be a counselor at Princeton High School, I said every student that I have is going to get the education that they deserve. I want to recognize some of the organizations that I have been involved with. Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, where I spent most of my life growing up, where I started my first historic research. Reverend Njumbe and members of the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, if you're here, would you please stand? Historical Society of Princeton. I was asked to join the Historical Society in 1990 and assisted with the exhibit of the history of the Italian Americans, the African Americans, and the African American Americans and the Jewish families in Princeton. When I started and continued my walking tours in 1997, I named them in honor of Mr. Hines. I would like Izzy to please stand and all those who are with the Historical Society of Princeton. The Princeton Borough Council. In 2007, after the death of Mr. Hines, I went before the council, it was then the Borough Council, to give rational and historical information about Mr. Hines as to why the plaza next to the library should be named after him. I would like all of those who are on the Princeton Borough Council, if you're still on the council, to stand. Borough Council. Not in our town. I started with them when it was a faith-based organization that started in 1998 with the Nassau Presbyterian Church, Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, and the Unitarian Universalist Church. And now it is an organization that promotes social justice, truth and transformation, racial literacy, the ills of white supremacy and racism, as well as recognition and awards of the high school and middle school students who have worked towards social justice. Will those and not in our town please stand? The Princeton Historic Preservation Commission has been instrumental in assisting and promoting the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood as a 20th historic district and approved the placement of 29 historic plaques to preserve the history of African Americans in Princeton. They have been my stalwart. With the Princeton Historic Preservation Commission, people please stand. The Princeton Council, for your service to the Princeton community and for your support for the historic designation and heritage plaques, and for all that you do to support me, I thank you. I also thank those who were on the council when this all happened, and that is Councilman Lance Liverman and Councilman Bernie Miller. Are they here? And Councilwoman Heather Howard, who were on the council when these sites were approved. Thank you very much. The Committee for the 20th Historic District. In 2014, when I asked that the Witherspoon-Jackson Historic neighborhood become a significant 20th Historic District, I knew that I would need others to support me. There are 8 Princeton residents who met every week in my dining room, met with the Princeton Council, and tirelessly gave reasons, research, and history for this district. I am sincerely grateful for their loyal the loyal soldiers in the struggle. The Witherspoon-Jackson community became the 20th Historic District in Princeton on April 11, 2016. Will those of you who are with that organization please stand? The Paul Robeson House of Princeton. The house where Paul Robeson, Princeton's native son, was born on April 9, 1898, located on the corner of Witherspoon and Green Streets, has been purchased by Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, where his father, Reverend William Drew Robeson, was a minister for 21 years. The church purchased the house to honor Paul Robeson and to be a community center in Princeton and a beacon of history and learning in the Witherspoon-Jackson community. Those who are on the board of the Paul Robeson House of Princeton, please stand. Byron Ruskin Center for Social Justice. Robert Schreiber just started this. We had our first Pride Parade. He has been a wonder in this community, and Robert was also my guidance counselor. I was his guidance counselor. And my student next to him, would you please stand? The Witherspoon Jackson Historical and Cultural Society. I just keep on going. After the designation of the 20th Historic District, I wanted to start an organization whose purpose was to research, study, preserve, and share the rich history of African Americans in Princeton. With the blessings of John Bailey, with whom I share the history for his families when he comes for joint effort, I started this organization in 2016. With the hard work and commitment of a faithful board of trustees, this organization has sponsored opening events and community support for activities. It is in the process of publishing our second newsletter. We will install the 4 of 29 heritage plaques at a ceremony of the 4 historic African American churches on August 10th. I am proud of this board and their loyalty to this organization. Those who are with the Witherspoon Jackson Historical and Cultural Society, please stand. Some of you already standing in the back. I would also like to recognize my childhood friends, all of my friends, the Princeton community residents, to stand so that I may see you and send my sincere thank you for being here tonight in spite of the storm. All of you who are my friends, please stand. My childhood friend Manetta Harris is here. Manetta Harris and her sister Florence, their father is the one who you celebrated, 4 years ago? He was the second African-American policeman, and he was shot in the line of duty. And every year, the policemen honor him. So Manetta, thank you for being here. And my friend Tony Higgs, who is from Philadelphia. I've known her since I counseled her children at Hightstown High School. I just want to, I could recognize all of you, and I'm just so happy that you're here, and it's almost like an out-of-body experience. I stand here on the shoulders of our ancestors and families who for 4 centuries have lived, struggled, faced segregation and Jim Crowism, however, through sweat, tears, faith, hope, and lots of love, have survived and sustained in the town of Princeton. I appreciate this recognition and am grateful to Eve for your sincere efforts. Thank you, Eve. Where's Eve? Oh. for seeing that all of these folks are here today, and for your kindness. Thank you to Mayor Lempert and council members, and also to Mr. Mark DeShiel. I have a quote, the message from my minister's sermon: I do not grow weary of love, and I will continue to serve this community and contribute, because this is my labor of love. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Shirley, and we thank you all for coming. This is really great.
Well, I'm talking to Shirley anyway.
And the mics are back, I think.
Mic is working. Ooh, okay. Miss Shirley Satterfield, or Sister Shirley, as many of us call her, is the beloved historian of our Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood. Her background in education with years of teaching and as a guidance counselor made it only natural for her to assume that role. And she continues to teach all of us every day. She has led movements. And yes, in the naming of the plaza after Albert Hines, a 104-year-old man, African-American man who had served on more municipal boards than anyone, helping to see our town through challenges and progress. She had to fight the inclination and the indignation of some who thought naming it after a dead president and slave owner, James Madison, was what Princeton should do. She always exudes a desire for fairness. And she has a following, disciples, if you will, inside and outside of the neighborhood that support her in telling this history, acknowledging the pain, and giving proper recognition to a people and a neighborhood. One calm early morning at 4:30, Shirley and I found ourselves sitting on her porch. Well, why, you might ask? Well, each street sort of has a block captain or porch police, as sometimes they're referred. And there was something odd happening in the middle of the night. And at 4 a.m., I was awakened by sounds of a vehicle, backup alarm, and a heavy engine, and loud sounds of crackling wood. My thought, we might have an illegal teardown happening on Quarry Street. I called the police, and then I called Shirley. She picked up the phone. That's what really surprised me, and we met on her steps. It turned out to be an inappropriately scheduled trash pickup at Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, of all places, her church. But Shirley has made me so aware, the literal sense of staying woke, of the ill intent of some. And while we knew that this may have been a false alarm, we had to stay vigilant in protecting the neighborhood, even after our successful efforts towards designating Witherspoon-Jackson a historic neighborhood. Shirley has spread her interest for knowing your history from and to many generations. She knows the value of delivering a message while hoping to right the wrongs. Shirley has had a profound influence on our town, is an inspiration, and has awakened us all. She is a treasure to the town of Princeton, and no one is more deserving of this recognition by the council. Congratulations, Shirley. We love you.
Thank you so much. And you described your work as a labor of love, and the love you give out, I hope you feel how much it is returned back to you, and you have filled this whole room, and it's a really wonderful way to start our meeting, and we hope that spirit will stay with us throughout all of our deliberations tonight. We could go on and on. I'm sure every single person could stand up and we could have like hours and hours of a love fest for you, and I wish we could do that, but unfortunately we have to get on to some of our business tonight, which is in the service of the community and in the spirit of all of your work too. So again, thank you so much for being an inspiration to all of us and for all of you've done for the town and the love that you give, and I hope you feel that it's returned right back at you. So thanks, Shirley. All right, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. And if you're welcome, everybody here is welcome to stay. If you were just here for Shirley, I want to give everybody a moment to, if you do want to leave, to step out. I know there was a fire call. So do you still want to stay in your spot on the agenda, or do you want to wait? You want to go now? Okay. Our first presentation this evening will be the Fire Study Recommendations Quarterly Report. And it looks like our microphones are back up and running, so Hopefully all of them are working now. And like to invite up Bob Gregory, who's our Director of Emergency Operations, and also Mark Frieda.
Yeah, huh? Need some help there? Yeah. Got my bottle. Thanks, pal. Nice movie. That's good. There we go. There we go. Wait. I think this computer made it back from, It was this one? One of these. There we go. No, it's not kicking it. Maybe it's. He had it up there before. Maybe it's this one. Ah, there you go, Marcus. Test. Can you hear me? I'm good? Okay. Yep. So some of our committee is left. There was a fire call, and with the weather, I'm not sure when everybody will be back, so we'll get going. But I would like to thank the members who came. Mark Frieda, president of Hook and Ladder. Chief Sal Baldino's back there. Lieutenant Pat Shields, Fire Marshal from University. Scott Lowe, and our Afrula Ippolito, one of our committee members who's been a big help, and I think everybody else is out on the engine and the ladder. So we'll get going. So tonight's purpose is to give everyone an update on the recommendations, where we're at, and also, you could go ahead to the next slide, Mark, and what the committee has been working on. Is it?
Yeah, while we're waiting, would those out in the hallway mind just closing the doors here so people can have their conversations outside? Thank you.
It's not flicking up there. It's not. For some reason. That's weird. Who is it? The right one? There were a couple of them open. I don't know what happened. That one? There we go. All right. So the committee, we came up with a new mission and vision. So those are the first two things that we wanted to do. And of course, our mission is to serve, protect, educate our public, right, in an effort to enhance safety and minimize loss of life and property. So we worked together on that. And then we worked on a vision statement, which is, I think it's there we go. All right, to be well organized, except with PowerPoint. We're usually good at this. Whenever you do training, it's death by PowerPoint first, then you go out to the burn building. So to be well organized, well led, well trained, right? Combination volunteer and career membership, fire department. So that's the direction we're heading, and we want to make sure we maintain balance. So that's our vision, so that we can serve the community the best possible way. So we're not going to go through all the recommendations, just the ones that are in process and the ones that we need to work on. So recommendation number 2 had to do with dealing with an assessment of residential, commercial, industrial occupancies, which we basically deemed high hazards. And the fire department, along with the fire marshal's office, went through the occupancies and developed a list, and that list is several different parts of businesses and different agencies in town. And we actually used part of that list for a tabletop exercise we did with our community partners, testing our resiliency, which you'll hear about next with the Climate Action Plan. So it worked out well. And that's always an in-process recommendation. The next one had to do with formalizing a mentoring program. And so part of the committee, what we did was we created an onboarding, which means since we're going to be hiring people, we had an onboarding process for the volunteers, so we kind of stepped it up. And we'll use it for both people who volunteer and the people that are hired. And that includes a mentoring program to make sure that people are trained properly and introduced to the fire department properly.
Excuse me. In case anybody else doesn't, I don't know what onboarding means.
Oh, I'm sorry, onboarding. So when you bring somebody into the organization, so when they either volunteer and join or we hire them, there's usually a training process where you come in. I know employees go through like HR training, IT training, and we kind of mirrored that with the fire department. So we have a training program for them so they just don't come there and, yep. And then I'm working with HR, the committee, we're basically looking at what their exit interview is like. And so recommendation 11 is still in process, and we're working on that to try to get feedback from volunteers who move on, why they move on, what was good, what we can improve on in the department. And then 13, the use of social media. So with the help of Access Princeton, who's been a big help with this, we pulled everything together, and I have a small committee now with firefighters, and we've been putting stuff out on Facebook, the OEM Twitter page as well, our Twitter account, fire safety, basic safety, a lot of stuff about weather. So that's been working well. We're also working on a video to use for recruiting. And then, of course, Instagram is a big way to get out to the public. So we're working on getting an Instagram page developed and doing some stuff on that for recruiting. And we're also working with reaching out to some of our community members like the university and Garden Theater to see if we could run a video prior to movies. Recommendation 16. So the recruiting. So we contracted with a recruiter, and we came up, we did a joint thing with Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad, and both agencies developed a really nice mailer, information on how to join. And unfortunately, there was some issues with the addresses and the mailing list that the contractor had. And in some defense, it's always difficult because people in Lawrence, Plainsboro, everybody wants a Princeton address, and that throws things off. So, but there was no excuse for things going out to Montgomery or up into Somerset County. So we basically paid for the services that were provided, and not everything that was originally agreed upon. And so we have all the mailers now, and we worked with the tax office. We got labels printed, and now we're actually labeling them, and we're just going to send them out ourselves to the community so we get the complete mailing done. We also, Human Services is actually working on our, the one that we developed for PFARs and the fire department to put it into Spanish so that we have those that we can hand out and bring out to the community. So Melissa's been a big help with that. So we're moving forward to do these things and get these mailers out. So it's a lot of labeling. Number 17 and 18. So this was basically looking at different duty shifts and things of that nature. And so we're constantly encouraging members to take additional shifts. The officers are focused their efforts on ensuring that our duty shifts are covered. So they're looking at it holistically. And we have started a per diem program, but it's within the volunteer ranks to try to fill those shifts that don't get filled with volunteer hours. So that's still a work in progress. Our plan we basically brought back the junior firefighter program. The state did send out some guidelines. We're going to follow them, and there's still legislation to make some changes to it. And at the last state meeting, there were some issues. I'm not exactly sure what, but we're moving forward. We'll be out in the schools again in the coming school year to educate everybody on the opportunities they have with the junior program. Recruiting, so just to go through recruiting, right? Social media is a big part of it now. We're also have events. We'll be out at National Night Out on August 6th, and then there's some events coming in the fall. We've done our own mailing list, and we're also working with the university to get into the student activity fair to help, to educate the students on the opportunities to volunteer. So our plan, the recommendation to hire 4 to 6 firefighters. So the decision was made to hire 6 firefighters, and we're currently have set up our process. So we are going to have a written test, a physical agility test, an interview process, and then background and medical testing. So the written and physical agility will be done by a third party. And so we're hands off. They come in, do the testing, send us who passed, who failed. The interview process will be within our committee, the fire department committee that's together. Plus we have talked about adding some individuals from the fire department and also maybe 1 or 2 individuals from the police department to take part in the interview process. We started hiring the per diems using volunteers first, and so we're going to see how we do covering our shifts and just monitor our progress and see what the needs are. So the timeline for this career staff, we're looking to send out an advertisement on or about August 19th. Written tests possibly somewhere first week in October, and then the physical agility test to follow the 3rd or 4th week, and then interviews in November and December if needed, and then hiring in December. So that's our timeline at this point. The committee has also developed, like I said, a lot of onboarding process. So there's a department orientation package we have now, a chain of command, which basically identifies, from the director through the chiefs, through the officers, down to the firefighters. And the goal, firefighter duties meaning, and duties meaning like their daily things that they'll do in the station, whereas job performance requirements, that's part of the training. So we do what we call a probie test. So when the firefighters go through all their onboarding training and things like that, there's actually a test they have to take to pass that. And then we also came up with pillars and that we want to live by. And the training, right, there's a committee now working on some training, a training program for new firefighters so that they become acclimated to the apparatus and, our policies and procedures. So the pillars, these are the pillars we have: membership, respect, fiscal stewardship, integrity, preservation, recognition, dedication, innovation, leadership, and service. So really the goal of all this is that the fire department leadership is committed to continue our recruiting efforts, right? A seamless transition for all volunteers to a combination department, and to ensure a more timely response with the proper crew size, and to help to reduce the burden on the volunteers, right, to help prevent burnout. So we're working, and that's one of the main goals of the pillars, is to make sure that we have that, seamless transition. And you're a firefighter, you're a firefighter. You're there to do a job, whether you're volunteering or career. I did send an email to everybody with a lot of these documents. I got it out late. I apologize. But if you read through them and have questions, feel free to get in touch with me, or if you had a chance to look at them, if you have any questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to start and thank, is this still on? Thank all of our volunteers. This is such an important way to volunteer for our community, and we're so thankful that we have and have had been able to have an all-volunteer department up until this point. And we want to make sure that obviously we're still recruiting volunteers and are putting the support into that part of the department too, even as we're going out to hire people. And I'm wondering if you could just take a step back, and if anybody's listening or in the room who's interested, to talk about what that process is like. If you're interested in volunteering, what's your first step? Do you go on the website, or how do you get involved?
Sure. If you're interested in volunteering, you could go to the town website in the fire department, and it actually brings you to a page to tell you what you need to do. And one of the first steps is contacting the chief. And once your contact is made, you can email, you can call our office during the daytime. There's a form you fill out about, your interests, who you are, and you actually meet with the recruiting committee. And basically what they do is they go through, if you're not a firefighter already, right, you have a little idea what it's all about. So they'll talk about what fire school is like, how long it takes, the commitment. They'll go through the basic rules and regs, especially the expectation of, you responding to calls and doing duty nights and how that all works. And then, kind of like the mentoring process. So you finish fire school, and then there's a period where you have to learn the ropes, if you will, where you come around, learn the apparatus, learn who the officers are, the other members, and basically how we operate. So, but the first step is visit the website, give us a call, and, come down and visit, and we'll let you know what it's all about.
And I know for the junior firefighters, it's 16 and 17-year-olds. For
Yes. Yep.
for the senior firefighters, is there like a age at which
18
you're
and above,
Okay,
right.
all the way up.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And it's important to say, too, that, when you become a member, you'll be part of one of the three companies as well. Engine 61, Mercer 63, or Princeton Hook and Ladder. So there's still that piece of it, too, which is a lot of rich history, in our company. So members go into a company, and you become part of the department that way.
I think the mayor was looking to volunteer there, Bob.
Yeah.
You might want to sign her up while we're here. First of all, as part of the committee listening and learning about the history and work of our fire department, I want to say that the ongoing process has been well done from my perspective. It was certainly an education for me. I was warned that the transition from all volunteer to career was sort of fraught with a lot of potential landmines, and that it could be trouble, but I think there's been a lot of honest conversations, and every detail, I can assure the public, has been gone over, both from the onboarding, from the way the department operates, how these new firefighters will be brought in. So well done to all. The big committee, I think, has worked out really well. I had some time last week on vacation. I got to spend some time with members of volunteer fire departments in East Windsor, number 46, and Montgomery, number 2. And it's worth repeating to the public that everyone is facing this issue. East Windsor already has a combination department. Montgomery, it continues to recruit for volunteers. So Princeton is not alone, but I think that there are opportunities for us to recruit, beyond the mayor, of course, to recruit volunteers to join in this proud tradition. People want to serve, and this is a good way to serve. It is a time commitment, which which is the sort of the number one roadblock for a lot of people. But I urge anyone, again, listening, to be a part of something of the good work that's going on in number 60. So that's it. Thank you.
Just following up on Tim's comments about some of the challenges of transitioning from a volunteer to a mixed department. I was interested to hear that all of your hiring of professionals so far, the per diems, have been from the volunteer ranks. And I'm curious how you manage that to, avoid having any resentment. Is it sort of a seniority thing that people are offered the opportunity first on some specific basis, or how do you decide who gets to be paid versus volunteer?
So that's a good question. So it's open to all the members. There's just two categories. So one category is people who are drivers and qualify to sit in the officer's seat with the state requirements. And then the other tier is somebody who's just a firefighter. So that way we didn't cut out people who are 1 or 2 years into the department. They could still take part in the program. They just don't have enough years in to drive or, hold the officer's seat. So
basically everybody's
everybody
doing
has,
on a sort of a rotating basis.
yep, everybody has an opportunity to do it if they want.
Thank you. Thank you for this report and for the work really important work you've been doing and addressing. It looks like it's... Is that, ooh, I can hear the difference. Okay, thank you. So, thank you for the really important work you've been doing in, making this really tremendous transition from one stage to a new stage, really, in the fire department's history. And I just have a couple of brief questions. One is, we had touched at a previous meeting on the possibility of offering housing of some sort, possibly on Chestnut Street, to volunteer firefighters, or other incentives that could be available to encourage volunteerism. And I was just wondering about the progress on that, if any, or still too early to speak about that.
Actually, I'll answer that because that's one project I was working on. At this point, we're still working out some of the details. We're really concentrating on the main issue of really getting those full-time career firefighters on board, but it's something that we're still looking at.
Okay, thank you. I'll just assume you'll update us when there's something to update, and
Yes.
I will stop pestering with questions. Okay. The other question had to do, again, following up on what Councilman Quinn said, is the integration of the career and the volunteer. And I wonder if you could give, if this is not too difficult, a couple of examples of how you see, how do you make somebody who's a volunteer feel valued when the person next to them is getting paid and they're not? How do you deal with that?
So that's been a part of a lot of our discussions. That's a part of what the chain of command is about. It's also, our vision, mission, all that rolled into it. But when it comes down to it, is a lot of our volunteers, we have a lot of younger volunteers now too. So they understand that this is to fill the gap. So over like the last couple weeks or months, you could see calls where you had 2 or 3 guys with 1 or 2 years experience and no driver. So they understand that this is to fill the gap, that these are, people coming on with experience. They're going to have experience driving, experience as firefighters. So it's twofold. They're actually encouraged that when they come or when they take a duty shift, someone will be there to drive the apparatus. And the second piece of that is it helps them learn too. There's a learning curve so that, at some point in time, they're going to have the years to start to drive and, to be able to take officers' classes and things like that. So, that's basically what we've been focusing on, is that this is to fill the gap, not to take over. And I think a lot of members understand that, and they see the advantage. And that's the other thing too, is talking to some members, they like the fact that it helps them not to burn out. Because we require 3 duty nights. There are people who were standing in the back of the room before, they'll do a lot more than 3 duty nights. But now it'll help them space out their time a little bit better too. So
if I may, I just want to comment on something. It's something that I was actually very impressed by the committee that they really looked at is understanding that this is going to not only just be, a change in the organization, but a cultural change. And that's why you see those things like the pillars and the mission and the vision. And they really thought about it a lot and determined that they really need to change the culture, that they're all firefighters, whether I'm getting paid or I'm volunteering. And so I'm really impressed that they really thought about that, and that's why you see some of the things that you see on their kind of orientation packets.
Yeah, and the committee did a really good job, and especially a special thanks to the 3 company presidents, because they really took a hard look at the pillars. Those guys have been around a while. So, we called on their wisdom to kind of help us with that process.
I just have a combination comment, question, and a thank you. I want to echo Mayor Lempert and my colleagues in thanking you and the volunteers for the work that you do. And my question first is, I understand you've already started recruiting for a few months.
Yep.
The recruitment process, and I was wondering how successful that has been. If you've already recruited some volunteers, or are they still in progress?
We have recruited a couple volunteers. One particular I'm thinking of was a firefighter already, and he's already on board. We have 1 or 2 others that still need to go to fire school. So they're on, but they'll probably go starting in the fall to fire school. And that'll take 3 months to get through that. So we are successful recruiting, but it's not a lot of people in one shot.
Right.
It's usually 1, 2 people that we get that come in. But hopefully with,
More,
a mass mailer that we're finally getting out and, then hitting social media with it, we'll get more interest.
And do you have a target number of ideally how many volunteers you would like to have?
That question's been asked, and I mean, it would be nice to have like 50 volunteers. Okay. But I think, realistically, the consultant told us that you should get 2% back of whatever mailing you send out with people of interest. Okay. So, in my opinion, if we can muster 10 or 12 more volunteers, that would be a real big help. So, we're going to focus on getting the information out and trying to pull some people in.
Wonderful. And I want to commend you and thank you for, you mentioned that you were doing some of your recruitment flyers in Spanish.
Yes.
So thank you. That's really great. And I also heard you say that you plan to attend some community events, including Community Night Out, to get the word out. And may I recommend as well in September for Welcoming Week. Human Services hasn't yet, the planning committee hasn't met yet to plan the event, but in the past they've had culture sharing night where we get members of the community from very diverse backgrounds to come to that, and usually community partners will have, or organizations will have info tables there, so that might be something you could consider.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. We like to do double duty at those. One recruiting and the other is education.
Great.
So fire education.
Thank you.
Great. Are there any more questions for Bob? Okay. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. And I would just like to thank the mayor and council and Tim and Mark especially for their hard work and your support on this. I mean, it's not done yet, but we're going to continue to move forward. So thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. We have a second presentation tonight, and this is on our climate action plan, and I'd like to invite up Molly Jones and Christine Symington from Sustainable Princeton.
All right, thank you. As the mayor introduced me, I'm Molly Jones of Sustainable Princeton. As I look around the room this evening, grand thanks is in order. While Sustainable Princeton has been the leader of the creation of Princeton's Climate Action Plan, there are so many here tonight who have contributed so many hours, so much effort, so much thought to this. So, it's 96 pages. We're not going to go through it one by one. Hopefully everybody's appreciative of that. But as we start, I wanted to take you on a quick trip down memory lane of the last month. This was June 18th, just a short while ago, right here in front of the Monument Hall office. This was the third time within, I believe, 3 weeks that we had flooding of roughly about an inch on this road alone. Many of other roads around town were equally as flooded. A couple weeks later, it was Quaker Bridge. These images are not of July 12th, but this is such a frequent occurrence that this was something that we've caught times before. So Quaker Bridge is one of the many roads that we have flooded frequently, along with River Road and others here in our community. 4 days later, July 16th, this was last week, and this continued into, maybe you could say earlier today, extremely high heat. Bob Gregory and his team had a cooling center there in Monument Hall. I think we all recognize the intensity of these temperatures. Oh, a day later, that heat was greeted by high winds. We have increased moisture, the trees have horizontal winds hit them, and many of the branches have been coming down. There were a number of gigantic branches down just within the last few days. So it's real, and it's happening here. I know that much of the choir is here tonight, but I wanted to reiterate the urgency of what it is that we're all facing. This graph shows you Mercer County data. So again, we're not talking about the globe. We're not talking about the nation or even just the state. We're looking at the reality here in our own community. 3.6 degree increase is what we've experienced when we look at average temperatures over, this is a 100-year period. Joining that is precipitation. For every 1 degree increase, the atmosphere can hold 4% more precipitation. So we're seeing that. We're seeing the increase of rains. The storm that we experienced tonight, I think, is very symptomatic of what we're seeing more frequently. The intensity is massive. It's awe-inspiring in not a positive way. 2018 was the worst, the highest peak. 64 inches per year of an average that is more typically around 46, 47.6. So we're seeing even heightened increase. One thing of note was last year there was no hurricane, so it was just over time, the frequency of major storms. Then there's a lot of things that we don't see on a daily basis. The air quality as well as illnesses, those vector-borne illnesses, our ticks, mosquitoes. They're living longer because there's more of a warm season, so they can survive longer. As well as the impacts of mental health. This is definitely something to be noted, particularly among the aging generation as we try to endure the intensity of the heat and flooding. So, with all that being said, I know we never had to reiterate or strengthen the point to all of you of the urgency of this, but we just wanted to make sure you're well aware, it's at the top of your minds, that this is extremely real and this is very much the problem of our time. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Christine to talk about the Climate Action Plan.
Thank you. And I know we've been in front of council before to talk about some of the earlier stages of the development of the Climate Action Plan, and forgive me for repeating, but for the folks in the room who may not know this, a Climate Action Plan is essentially two things. It is a plan that identifies strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, so that's mitigation, and secondly, and as importantly, be better prepared for the impacts of climate change. Those are resiliency strategies. So there are hundreds of cities across the country that have climate action plans, and they attempt to achieve these two things. So the development of the plan was transpired in a way that we wanted to make sure that there were many members of the community, members of the organizations, the committees and commissions that are going to be critical to implementing the plan were part of the development of the plan. So the structure was a steering committee that oversaw the plan development, provided guidance and direction, and 5 working groups that were filled with community members, subject matter experts, municipal staff, municipal council members, folks from the Environmental Commission. We want to make sure that the folks who were coming up with these strategies were the ones, as I said, who were going to be critical to implementing them, but also members of the community to get the input from the folks in the community who are going to also be critical to implementing the plan. So that was the structure, and they met over the course of, let's say, since beginning of 2018 till this summer. The steering committee met about 12 times throughout that period, taking the work that was coming out of the working groups, providing feedback, and most importantly, determining what Princeton's greenhouse gas reduction goal or goals is going to be. Throughout that process, we had a number of community engagement events. You can see we've tallied them here. It's about 4,600. That includes our the Let's Talk Climate events that we had initially to get community feedback, where folks wrote on down on pieces of paper what concerned them about climate change in the community. We had 4 Great Ideas events, which covered 4 of the 4 working groups, 4 of the 5 working groups, and they introduced what some of the concepts were that were coming out of the Climate Action Plan development process. We had, we went to the schools, we went to houses of faith, and we had a Green Fest, if you remember, where folks had to fill out a passport to win a raffle to get a chance to win a prize and show that they've talked to somebody about one of the aspects in the Climate Action Plan. That was about 700 people that came to that event. And then by looking at folks who made comments on the draft when it was online and folks who have gone online to view it, we've got several thousand more folks who've engaged with the plan. So here we are now in front of council with the request to see that you will adopt the plan by resolution. So sorry for the distorted graphics there, but as I said, one of the things the steering committee was tasked with was setting a goal of what the reduction of emissions is going to be. As I said, there are many cities across the country that have climate action plans, and many of them have goals like ours. And the steering committee has come to a decision that Princeton's goal should be 80% reduction by 2050 based on 2010 emission levels, with interim goals of 50% by 2030 and 65% by 2040, and that we will pursue efforts to try to reach 100% reduction in emissions by 2050. The governance or the oversight of this plan will requires that it will be a progress report will happen every 3 years, and then in 9 years the plan will be fully updated. By that time we'll know if some of our efforts have been successful, new technology may be available that we want to institute into the plan, and that is how we're going to sort of make sure we're keeping track towards that goal of 80% by 2050. And maybe in 3 years we'll be able to say, yes, we can actually get to 100% reduction by 2050. So one of the questions put forth by the steering committee was, can we achieve that goal? So we were very fortunate to have a team of folks led by a senior research engineer from the Andlinger Center of Energy and the Environment to lead a group of current university students, a recent university graduate, some community members with sort of subject matter expertise to do some forecasting. Can we get to 80% by 50, considering the fact that the town is likely to grow? And they came up with some of these projections. They looked at what's sort of like the worst case scenario where we do nothing or we stop existing emission reduction strategies and the town grows. Where will we be in 2050? That's the top trend line. Then there are things that are a little bit less within the municipality's control, things that will happen at a state level, things that the university is already committed to. They've committed to 0% emissions in their buildings by 2040. And so they modeled what that would do. And then they looked at some of the priority actions that had been identified in the plan and said, okay, will those get us to 80 by 50? And in a combination of these things, we think we can get there. It won't be easy, but it is possible. So the role of Princeton Council, if you've looked at the draft, you'll see that for every action there is a leader and partners identified. These were identified through the working group and the steering committee, and we did make sure that all of these folks who are identified as leaders are aware that they're on the hook to see these through. Fortunately, many of these actions are things that these groups are already intending to do, so it wasn't as though we were adding new work to these groups. For the ones where council is put as the lead, it's probably because there's some sort of policy or something that was within council's control to enact. And it's understood that things that may require policy or ordinances will go through the normal process of the vetting, the research, the introduction, and community engagement. You'll also see that in the actions we've identified related plans that support or complement that action, and in some cases we know that there's already funding sources for them. And you can also see that we have co-benefits associated with these actions. Some folks have asked, why does Princeton need to bother with the climate action plan? Our emissions are a drop in the bucket globally. They are, and it's important for us to set a standard that hopefully our other cities and our neighboring cities will adopt. But it's also because we want to improve the local quality of life, and so we've identified which of these actions which will have sort of that impact here locally. Of the 80 plus actions that are in the plan, there are at least 16 that are already initiated and in progress. So we're not just starting from scratch here. We pulled out some of those that are already initiated in the energy section. As you know, we were in front of council a few weeks ago to talk about renewable government and energy aggregation. We're looking at pursuing community solar, and we've have a history of promoting energy efficiency programs. The Environmental Commission has already started work on developing a green building and sustainability element to be integrated into the master plan, so that's in the works. Also within land use and transportation, as you know, the Transit Advisory Committee is already working on improving the outreach and education and the to get folks to use public transit with their Princeton Transit effort. We've got already some EV charging stations already in town, and hopefully there'll be more coming soon. Within the natural resources section, the animal control officer has got a pretty good plan to deal with deer, which is an invasive species. And the Shade Tree Commission is already working on improving the inventory, and they've provided a tree planting list of native species that will be more hardier in the changing climate. And last, in the resiliency section, as you are aware, the municipality received a $50,000 grant from Pew Charitable Trust recently to help fund a big, almost all of these actions right here. And that is underway right now with 2 interns that have been working over the summer to develop a template to which we can capture information about residents who are more vulnerable to climate change and improving the process by which emergency responders can react to them in times of need. So with that, we are here to answer any questions you have about the plan.
I have a couple questions to start with. The first is, I know the state recently came out with their energy plan, and they have a goal of 100% clean energy by 2050. So can you just speak how our 80% relates to the 100% at the state level, and are we setting our sights too low?
Right. So that has to do with the electricity supply. So our goal is all emissions. So that includes emissions from the transportation sector. So now the state does have an 80% reduction by 2050 goal, but the 100% has to do with the grid. So when you look at those projections, it does take into account when you, it's under clean state grid and university buildings. That's assuming they meet that goal. So that will enable us to meet our goal because any electricity we do consume will be coming from more renewable sources. But
Great.
we can help spur that by, adopting, by pursuing community solar and renewable government energy aggregation. That helps sort of spur that 100% goal for the state. So they're sort of intertwined.
Great. And then this is just more of a technical ask, is when you, the section where you, I think there was a memo where you have a matrix of, you've peeled off the council.
Policies, yes.
Yes, policies. The one column that was omitted from that is the greenhouse gas impact.
Oh.
So I think that's just helpful for us to
Sure.
see on
Okay.
that, like which has the highest impact, because it will help us with potentially with prioritizing what we take on first
We
versus
can do
second.
that. And you may note that some of them in the plan, we don't have estimates right now, so that has been ongoing. We do, as I said, we have a team, that CAPERS team continues to meet weekly and is currently trying to put better estimates, put estimates to the ones that we don't have right now, and also to determine what the payback would be for, the funds that may need to be invested to pursue that action.
Great.
I
Mr. Cohen?
just want to make a quick comment related to that. So population growth could essentially offset all of the benefits from the state grid getting clean and from Princeton getting clean if we don't do smart growth. And we're still trying to get a handle on how much we can improve that. But if growth trends that have been happening in terms of population growth for Princeton over the last 10 years continue for the next 30 years, it's going to be all that much harder to meet these goals, and making sure that we're doing smart growth is going to be one of our most effective tools for trying to make sure it works.
Yeah, very much. The CAPERS team has looked at a couple of different growth scenarios, but this is definitely an unknown, and so very hard to project. But the point made by Councilman Cohen is very true, that with smart growth, that'll reduce the impact no matter how big we grow.
Well, I was actually going to ask about that, the way you were measuring, and I guess you decided not to do a per capita and base it on.
We do have in the plan like what a per capita reduction would look like per person.
But in your goals.
Yeah, looking across, that was something that the steering committee considered early on is, what type of goal should we have? Most cities have this 80% reduction. And didn't come across many that had a per capita. I think it's one way to look at it, but I think it's, trying to achieve, having a percentage goal of overall emissions is also, important as well. But
It almost seems a little bit unfair, or, for instance, if we add more affordable housing and we end up in doing that, taking on more growth, and then it seems like we're not making progress what we actually are, because
yeah, I'd also say that the 80% by 2050 isn't some magic number. It's something that sort of follows what the IPCC's report said we must do to stay beneath the 2 degrees centigrade increase of temperatures over pre-industrial levels. So it sort of matches with sort of what globally is being said needs to be done to avoid the worst effects of climate change.
I also want to note that the materials management section of the climate action plan really begins digging into, while it doesn't divide the emissions footprint by individual residents, it really provides some forward-thinking ways of how individuals can reduce their own footprint. I mean, that is a one-by-one game, and very much the individual's footprint varies by their consumption patterns, and so we're trying to put some thought and urging into that area.
Well, I just want, I mean, I wasn't going to mention this, but because I know I sound like a broken record, but about this subject, but I do think we should, when you look at this chart and see how much paper is part of everyone's profile, I didn't realize it was second. I thought it was third after food waste as taking up our
You're referring to the Mercer County
yeah.
Base Characterization Report, yes.
And I would encourage people to change their newspaper subscriptions to online, like, because, you know, sometimes people have 2 full recycling cans of purely of paper, and somehow no one talks about that, and I've never understand that. News, as you know, news organizations now are encouraging online subscriptions, and I just want to make a little plug for that. I think our town would look, it seems like we could reduce the paper consumption by half.
And I just want to credit Councilwoman Carmiller for pushing the council when we consolidated to go paperless. So we used to get these stacks. Everyone's seen our agenda packet, and I think that was a great improvement, and actually makes it easier to find things later too. So that's great.
And thanks to Councilman Cohen for continuing that work at the planning board level. Keep moving the needle. And as a print subscriber to the New York Times Daily, I bring it to the library every day and leave it in the cafe where it's recycled many times during the day. So first of all, it's very exciting time to follow along with this, from the inception of the idea to the presentation of the resolution tonight. So for everyone who's been involved with this, job well done. And I have some questions on the summary of actions requiring council oversight. I'm not sure whether that was in the public package or whether it was. Okay, so I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit. The time frame for all of these is listed as short term. So can we hone in a little bit on what you consider to be short term? Is that a year, 3 years?
So in the plan that's defined is within the next 3 to 5 years. And interesting anecdote for you is when we had all the working groups together to look at the actions that they had prioritized, we asked them to put a time frame as the short term or long term. Of the 80 actions, I think only 3 did people put long term. So we really had to go back and say this just, these will all require time and resources and money, and so we really have to, do a better job of identifying what is short-term or long-term. So yeah, a lot of them are short-term. As I mentioned, some of them are already in action, but we expect that through the council's goal and priority the annual goals and priority sessions, that will do a sort of another pass at these and figure out what can be done, for the next year. Same with all the boards, committees, and commissions who have items that are where they are the lead. They're going to have to also sort of figure out what they can get done and in what order. And some of it can be shifted based on what comes along. We weren't expecting there would be a $50,000 grant opportunity to start working on resiliency strategies, so you kind of have to do a little catch as catch can. When something comes up and you can get it done, we want to be able to be nimble.
Absolutely. I see about 5 years worth of council work here if this were all we were focusing on. Yes. And again, this is of the utmost importance. Don't mean to diminish that at all. I just think, part of it is managing expectations. So if I can get to my questions really fast, in Energy 1.2, require large commercial buildings and multifamily buildings to benchmark and report their energy performance. Who are they going to be reporting to?
So right now, when Governor Murphy passed the Clean Energy Act, there is a state law that says that buildings that are 25,000 square feet or more have to benchmark and disclose their emissions. We've been following how that is going at the state level in terms of identifying how that will be done and who will be responsible. So we're kind of waiting to hear of like how they're going to manage it at a state level. And there was no size listed there because we wanted to leave it. It was determined by the working group to sort of leave that open to see if Princeton wanted to maybe have a smaller building requirement. In other cities that have this ordinance in place, it's someone in the local government who is responsible for providing a mechanism or a web page where they report this, and then it's also shared and disclosed. So states like Philadelphia, Austin, Texas, Chicago, there are a number of cities that have this in place already. So I think we would look to them and the state to figure out how it would be implemented in Princeton.
So a lot of these would be decided by council. So for instance, require an energy audit and disclosure at time of sale or lease for older residential, commercial, and multifamily buildings. Would that apply to structures that are purchased for tear down? Again, we would be adding a cost to a person trying to maximize the sale price of their home. So
right. I think when it comes to the point to determine, what would fall into that, we would determine if that's something included. Again, this is something that other cities have in place, the time of sale ordinance. So there are examples we can look at to see how they include them and how they manage them. And in the emission reduction analysis that we do have for that, information that was factored into what the potential reductions are is we looked at how many houses change hands in a given year in Princeton to kind of understand how often would this be required, and looking at the other cities who have done this to like who bears the cost, does it add to the cost? So these things, as we said, all these things do have to be vetted and researched, but they were identified as high priorities for the potential for reductions.
in 3.4, you identify areas for conceptual urban design plans. There's a neighborhood in here called Nassau North that I've never heard of. Is that like the east end of Nassau?
It's Jugtown.
Is it Jugtown? Then say Jugtown, please. And I noticed that absent from this is something that's we always hear about when we talk about things like affordable housing and impacts on neighborhoods, is that there's no mention of the western section here. And the western section meets the criteria for being a transit-oriented neighborhood. The 606 runs down 206 and stops at Library and Hibben and
I don't think that was meant
Edgerstone.
as an exhaustive list. It was sort of an example of areas that were sort of known to have some potential development happen soon that would be.
I'm almost done. Thank you for hanging in there. And I know that you've given great thought to all of these. So require employers with more than 50 employees and new developments that will generate more than 50 employees to implement transportation demand management programs. First of all, I'm enthusiastic about all these goals and applaud them. How would that work in the case of, say, we have a very vibrant restaurant sector? Would that be by the by restaurant or by the owner of like multiple restaurants?
Yeah, I don't think we got to that level of detail to figure out what qualifies as, if you have 50 employees. The university has a TDM management plan, and so I think that group was thinking of things like larger employers like Church and Dwight, like some of the larger ones, municipality itself has over 50
The public
employees.
school system.
Yeah, the public school system. So, those certainly have a lot of folks that commute in. So there was a potential there. But these the working group did not necessarily get down to the level of determining, what's in, what's out. Again, all these will then have to be vetted and determined. And
I just don't want to scare people by putting something out and having, again, it's about managing expectations.
Yeah.
So you say require public events to be zero waste, and is a public event like a block party, or would
I think anything
we
you probably
require?
would require to get a
Jugtown
permit.
has zero waste block parties, by the way.
Yeah, I think anything that was required to have a permit, or we're thinking like Communiversity, like Jazz Fest, like, things that generate a lot of waste, that typically it is up to the municipality to then deal with the removal of that waste.
Okay, and I had a question I'll share with you offline about the leaves and brush eternal issue in Princeton. But thank you again. This is very exciting, and thanks for all your hard work, and everyone who's in the room who's worked hard on this.
Yes.
I just want to make a suggestion in terms of prioritizing. As Councilman Quinn was saying, there's a lot for us to do, and it's a little bit hard to know what order to do it in. I think that if we could get our statistical analysis group to make a graph that's sort of like the one that's showing how we get to the 80% reduction by 2050, but to have it just for council actions and sort of show how big a chunk each of our potential actions can.
They're in their room and they're nodding, so
Yeah.
I say they can do it.
Because I think, when we as a council see that paper reduction, while it may be wonderful for the environment, is going to get us, 0.01% of the way towards greenhouse gas reduction, because little factoid for the rest of the people on council, solid waste only contributes 2% to the footprint of the community in terms of greenhouse gases. It's really transportation, buildings that
That is when you
the
view
lion's
things from
share.
a production-based inventory. We do include in the plan a consumption-based inventory. Those are less well-developed in terms of methodology and harder to measure. But when you look at a consumption inventory, you're looking at it from the perspective of an individual and their choices as to what makes more emissions, and it counts the upstream emissions of that product or service being developed too. So paper might be a little different if you look at it from a personal perspective.
But where the municipality can have an impact is
Yes.
definitely a
Right.
focus of the
Probably.
production inventory.
The example I like to use is, every change from a fossil fuel vehicle to an electric vehicle, is a big piece of getting to the goal that we need, as opposed to getting somebody to stop subscribing to
Right,
paper newspapers.
correct.
Thank you. Again, I just want to repeat what many of my colleagues have said. Thank you to you, the two of you, to everyone else who's
It was
been.
more than just us. It
I
was
know,
our
I know, I
colleagues
know,
are here
I
too.
know. I was going
All
there.
of that 4,600 was also
Yes.
due in part to Jenny Ludmer, our community outreach manager, who had to organize a lot of those events. So.
Yes. So thank you, Jenny. And thank you, everyone else. This really is just an incredible effort, sustained effort over a couple of years, 2 to 3 years. So I just wanted to show my appreciation for that and my excitement about being part of embarking on the next stage of this. But I'm also asking for a little hand-holding, as I think some of my colleagues have said, in terms of, what gives us the most bang for the buck in terms of what order, what do we prioritize, how should we go about setting our goals and moving forward, as well as with the various committees, environmental committee, shade tree, et cetera, public transportation. So I know that the plan calls for a 3-year and 9-year report. And I know you guys aren't going to go home and like sleep for the next 3 years. So I'm wondering particularly like what happens over the next 3 years before the official report to kind of keep some kind of sense on how we're doing, make sure that we're making the steps that we need to.
Sustainable Princeton is committed to sort of having that, what we call cap maintenance, sort of keeping tabs on how things are progressing, not in addition to the actions where we're the lead. The inventory will update every year, so we'll know what our inventory is. It might be hard to see trends when you only do it every year, but I'll let Molly, speak to that, but we believe our role will be to, keep everyone's feet to the fire and give out reports on how things are going.
I would just add that the, ICLEI is kind of this online system that we've been beginning to track. So as Christine mentioned, that'll become kind of one of the sources where, things continue to be monitored. But I think our hope would definitely be that as the council visits its goals and objectives for the year and the administrator asks for those quarterly reports, that's where we would be touching base and say, sharing with you progress and vice versa. I think we would be setting kind of our joint agenda and goals to move some of these initiatives forward.
And another question is, how do you see what you're doing, interacting, what's being done on the state level with the carbon reduction efforts through what Climate Central is working on, or what was presented at the last PEC meeting at the state level for trying to do like a carbon buyback policy?
So I think, it all very much goes hand in hand, and very much as well with the university and their sustainability action plan. We are setting local examples here, and so I think that this is a path that needs to be broken for all 565 municipalities in the state, and anything that we, Princeton, can do to blaze a trail is something that will be of great benefit to any of our other neighbors and community members in the state. And so I think we're all putting oars into the water and pushing in the same direction. Some things are going to have greater impact than others. For sure, the more that happens on the state or potentially federal level will benefit the work that we are doing, but I think we are very much aiming for the same targets.
Yeah, in the plan at the end of every section, it is identified what some of those state and other sort of regional efforts that will enable the plan to meet its goals. We think staying informed of where they are, and for the folks in Princeton who are sort of spearheading some of those efforts, like Citizens Climate Lobby and Climate Central, is to remain close to them and, just see them as partners and seeing if there's any sort of intersection. But again, the actions in the plan are things that are really more directly within the control of folks here in the community.
Okay, and this is a perfect segue to my last question, which is I'm wondering, and this is really not related to what you're doing here in Princeton, but I'm wondering if organizations in other parts of New Jersey, just out of curiosity, have been reaching out to you. Is this a common thing that people are excited by what's going on here and reaching out to you for advice?
Particularly through the Sustainable Jersey Network. I think others are becoming aware of what we're doing, and so we've been helping to share our lessons learned. So for example, on community solar over the last month, I've helped support the education of a couple of other hubs, counties that are coming together that are also trying to understand the intricacies of these various programs. So yes, very much. We are trying, the rising tide raises all ships, and so we're trying to do what we can to be supportive of others and share our lessons learned.
Yeah, Sustainable Jersey has asked that the Princeton present the climate action plan of the League of Municipalities in November. Again, seeing that as an opportunity to help other communities, particularly ones that are, adjoining ours, to, sort of help each other, execute our own climate action plans. But because a lot of these things don't end at our borders, we do need a lot of help, particularly with transportation, for our neighbors to sort of be in lockstep with us.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I don't have any questions to add to what has already been asked, but I do want to thank you and your partners, your colleagues, and all your community partners, and all the work that you've done and what you put into this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one final question. I know that you'd been working with a group of Princeton University students in terms of how do you have a climate action plan that actually gets implemented? And I was wondering if you could just take a step back and talk a minute about lessons learned from that process, because we've been talking about mostly the municipal piece of this, but I know there's a larger plan too, and how you're going about engaging residents and businesses and all the other players that are going to be needed to make this happen holistically.
Sure. So a number of responses on that front. So first off, I think some of the excellent work that some of the Princeton University students did was really on the marketing and how we get the plan to be embraced. And I think the greatest lesson passed down to us was make it into bite-sized pieces. I mean, this is daunting. 96 pages is daunting. And so really we've been trying to think about how we break it down to messages that people can change in their daily life. In a brief moment, especially the emergency messages around resiliency. So the Pew Grant, for example, has some marketing funds for us to push those out this fall. So I think that was one major way that we are taking those lessons from those university experiences to utilize. To the second piece of your question of how do we bring more and more stakeholders. Our goal of bringing 4,600 people into the process of developing this plan was really about having it grow from within and building ownership throughout the community. And so we very much have tried to have these strategies come out of our different stakeholder audiences. And so we've tried to integrate people into this process so that this isn't Sustainable Princeton's plan. This is the community's plan. And so I think even as the letters of support demonstrate that people in these various leadership groups are vested in what is articulated through the plan, and we're looking forward to working with them and implementing it moving forward.
Great. Yeah, and I think our work really has only just begun. Is that an emergency service? Yeah. Is that a
flood alert?
Flood alert. Yeah, the work has only begun. One of the programs that Sustainable Princeton has launched recently was the STAR neighborhood program, and we've partnered with Councilman Cohen in his neighborhood buddy program as sort of a mechanism, as sort of a framework to get the actions out into the community through these neighborhood networks. So we've tried to make sure we integrate the goals of the plan in as many ways as possible in different avenues so that it becomes sort of embedded with a lot of sustainability actions going forward.
Okay, great. Before we vote on the resolution, was there anybody who wanted to speak to this before council votes? Okay. Bainey, come on up.
So my name is Bainey Surrey. I'm a 9-year resident of the community of Princeton, and I haven't had a chance to completely digest the report. It's certainly exciting to see something be created that's addressing this issue, and it's certainly exciting to see that there is some measurable action that's going to be taken. I do want to say that I see one thing missing from the report, and that's dealing with the plastic bag issue, and that I can understand that we can't take on everything. But I think it's important when you're dealing with climate change at this stage that we're facing to recognize that what's really needed is bold action. It's wonderful to take on items that are measurable and certainly to want to do things that are possible, but I think it's also important to do things that maybe we feel are impossible. I mean, we are facing a crisis of epic proportion. We don't need to debate whether or not climate change is real. I mean, I think at this point, hopefully, most of the world does know that it's real. But I'm sitting back and I'm watching counties and states and countries address the plastic bag issue. And it's a low-hanging fruit issue that we could address. It's something that would hopefully push the state to take action. It's something that we haven't considered, and I don't understand why it's not being included. I appreciate that this report took into account, you know, a large number of residents. I unfortunately wasn't involved in that process, and that's for personal reasons, but it's an issue that I do want to bring up. But I want to urge council to take bold action and to try to take on things that maybe don't seem as easy as some of the other things that we're willing to address. And I think it's important to push towards behavioral changes that we know will have an impact. And one of the wonderful things about tackling an issue like that is that we don't have to debate what works. We already know what works. We've seen it working, and we are seeing it work all over the world. I mean, the ocean is filled with those plastic bags. It's an easy issue to address. And I know I've talked to council. Unfortunately, most of council has changed. And so really only Jenny and Liz are the only two mayor and council members left that I had addressed the issue with. And I do want to applaud Jenny for always being so willing to consider this. But it's just something that I like to bring up. It's an issue that the residents have worked on. If you're concerned about doing something that the town really cares about, all you have to do is look at the statistics of how we voted on the referendum. And it is unbelievable to see that kind of conscious action from a community, people coming out in every single district, save one, and saying, this is an issue that we want to address. So if we're going to take on climate action issues, I think it's important to take on issues and to tackle things that we know are going to work. And this is just one thing that I hope can be revisited. Again, I applaud Sustainable Princeton and the entire community for coming together, for putting together something that is out there now with action. I think that having a strategic plan is always a good thing, but it is an issue, like I said, that I would like us to consider revisiting because it's one that would have measurable impact. And I think that's really important when facing climate change in the position that we're in right now. It's about being able to take action that you can look to and really see that it has an impact. And if we were to implement something here, I think it would have an impact. And we are so blessed, you know, to have the university here. And I've seen the university take really bold action on climate change, and I would like to see our community do that too.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. If anybody would like to speak to this, I'd encourage you to come up to the microphone and form a line and state your name and give your comment.
Sophie Glovier, 68 Drake's Corner Road. I'm chair of the Environmental Commission, and I am really here just to voice our strong support for this plan, to thank Sustainable Princeton for everything that they've done, the hours and hours and hours of pulling everybody together, and especially the university, because I feel like this plan is really rooted in data and science, and that is really important. I do want to stress that, as Tim pointed out, there are a lot of actions. Council is very busy with a lot of things, and it really is going to take time to address these issues. It's exciting to see some things that really are going to make a big difference already moving forward, like the community solar, like the renewable energy aggregation. But there are going to be tough issues to look at because, as we talked about, population will be increasing. So we really have to move to a place where our new building and our redevelopment gets us much closer to net zero. So just to urge you that in endorsing this, we're really all going to take this on together and hopefully give it the time it needs. And the Environmental Commission is really excited to partner with you on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Surinder Sharma, and first of all, I'd like to congratulate the Sustainable Princeton producing a great report. And last year, when I first attended the meeting at Princeton University regarding the GHG emissions, I had some doubts regarding the methods that they use. So thank you. There are two ways to analyze the GHGs, as you know, production and emissions. And I looked at those, and as an engineer, I said, there's a factor of 2, one versus the other. So I tried to analyze, tried to understand what the reasons. Because we're using a baseline as of today, like year 2010 is 420,000 metric tons of carbon emissions. So I said, well, if I use the other method, which is the consumption-based, which is actually more realistic, more holistic, and that's what we're trying to actually tackle, why not to use that as a baseline to start with? And the other part, and I have discussed this, Bernie Miller, and I have addressed this with the Sustainable Princeton folks, but I just like to kind of think about from technical perspective, the way to look at the data, you can't use a number that is year 2010 until you normalize it. Normalizing, because that number will change depending upon how the factor change. Our population may grow a lot more. That 440 number that we are using to bring it down to 80% will be meaningless. So my point is that we should use a unit, which is normalizing, means to either to a single household or to a single person living in the community. That will be more meaningful way of trending anything over long term. Point one. Secondly, the other part, which again, I also like to acknowledge everybody who's here who helped, and I understand that. I have attended some meetings, and I've been very impressed by what they have been trying to do. But I also like to add one more thing. In any organization, whether it's a municipality or whether it's Sustainable Princeton, should be a representative of the community it serves. I didn't see that. I looked at the steering committee, I looked at the management, I looked at that, and there are a lot of people in this community who may have knowledge that I think we need to tap upon. And I know personally, I lived in a very small village, and I knew how to survive on the minimum. We were like ingrained in our system about the air, earth, and the water. It's in our scriptures, and I'm sure it's in everywhere else, but I understand what it means. But I also like to say, yes, you have to take some knowledge from many different ways. Science, which is what we're talking about, and we appreciate all the data that you analyzed and we verified it, and yes, we are looking at the trends. We have to be proactive. But what I'm trying to say is trying to work with you is not to criticize you. I wanted to congratulate you how hard it is to analyze all these data. But there are some, in my mind, I think we can do better. And I like to kind of let you know that I have critically criticized last year when I first looked at it. I said, gee, anytime you do analysis could be within 10-15%. We have factor 1.93, and they address that in this report, and thank you for that. But we cannot overlook what number we should be using as our baseline. And the other important part is the normalizing of the data today that we should be trending it, because 440,000 metric tons means nothing 50 years from now, nothing, until you normalize the data. And that's what I hope like people who are here as scientists can understand what normalizing means. And that's what I wanted to say, and that's my inputs. And again, thank you, wonderful job. It's a good report. I think you should be all proud of it. But here, I'm not criticizing, but I'm trying to give you the input. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Joy Barnes. I am a teacher at Princeton High School. I want to first say thank you to Christine and Molly for actually coming to the Princeton High School for our social justice shutdown. As part of that day, we wanted to do a lot of things, and it was a quite ambitious effort. But I think as a citizen, I'm not a citizen of Princeton outside of my professional commitment to this community. And as a global citizen, I'm very much committed to sustainable practice. I'm also Black. If you hadn't noticed, I think one of the very large missing voices, populations of voices that are missing, is from communities of color. Education needs to be prioritized in this effort, and it's currently not really. I realize that teachers in the Princeton Public Schools have a lot already that we do, and many of us do not live in this community. I heard someone talk about housing and transportation as wasteful. And so many of us come into this community, and that is something perhaps to think about as a more sustainable practice of helping teachers not have to travel so far. Additionally, I would challenge us all as a community to think about construction and sustainable construction projects as we adopt plans for the high school that are already in place at the university around green roofs, sloped patterns that will help us with flooding in our building, heating and cooling, and perhaps allowing students to become a part of the groundwork. I realize that will mean that there needs to be some resources put and some partnerships created, perhaps with the university, to build a long-term plan, 5-year plan that starts perhaps in 7th grade that will allow teachers and families to build better programs for youth, especially as we reconfigure our science, our gifted and talented programs. This is the watershed moment. And I think it will be a missed opportunity if, as leadership in this town, you don't seize the moment. And so, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for coming tonight and for helping to educate our kids. So I think you'll be a great partner moving forward on this. I'm glad you've already made the connection and that you guys have been out to the schools. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak before we bring the resolution forward? Okay. Is there a motion then for Resolution 19227, resolution in support of Princeton's climate action plan?
So moved.
Second.
I'm going to give it to Mr. Cohen for his work on this. So it's moved by Mr. Cohen, and I'll say seconded by Mr. Quinn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution passes unanimously, and I feel like this is the beginning, and you'll be back, I'm sure. So thank you very much. So next on our agenda is comments from the public for items not on the agenda. And after we do public comment, I would like to see if there's a motion to amend the agenda to move up Ordinance 2019-32. No, wait, that's not right. Sorry, the Ordinance Introduction, which is 2019-30. Which is the license for outdoor dining for Christine's.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
So it's moved by Ms. Kremler and seconded by Mr. Quinn to amend the agenda. All in favor of amending the agenda?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, great. So next we'll do public comment, and after that we'll do the ordinance introduction. So I'd like to start, actually I was going to start with the sign-up sheet, and then Kate will be next. So Adam Bierman.
Oh, hi, Adam Bierman, Grover Avenue. Thanks for your time and attention. I want to just discuss, comment on some questions concerning the illegal dump on River Road. First, amongst other problems I see it as a public safety issue with the possibility of contamination to our groundwater due to the illegal dumping of asbestos and asphalt. So I was personally dismayed. I thought with a lack of urgency by the Mayor and Council, if I'm wrong, please tell me, to react to this public safety issue. I think you all waited about 2 weeks to have a public comment, I think after Planet Princeton started breaking the story. I have 3 big questions, or 4 maybe, and again, not that you can answer them all now, but how much will this second bribery scandal in 6 years cost the Princeton taxpayers? All those consultants, cleanups, legal fees. It's going to go on and on probably. Your town lawyer must be on speed dial. And one question I have too is, when did he get out of law school? How long has he been practicing? That's one thing I really want to know, because he's going to be going up against some good lawyers. Okay. Where was the oversight and accountability by the governing body promised after the last bribery scandal in late 2013, the parking meter scandal? As council members are assigned to each department specifically, how often are council members attending staff meetings in their assigned departments? When are they actually visiting the department facilities? In this particular case, there were big piles, I've been told, pictures of asphalt and asbestos in plain sight of the building. How could they not know what was going on? what is the current staff culture created by the governing body that whistleblowers felt they needed to report to Planet Princeton instead of speaking freely to their administrators or members of the governing body? One person told me, anonymously, that this was management by fear. Again, if so, can we change this toxic culture so we can proactively avoid another sewer gate in the future? And also, have the fired sewer workers been replaced so that day-to-day jobs are getting done? The reason I'm asking, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is because I heard in 2018 when the IT department had a scandal, where they had to suspend and fire people for not disposing of town computers properly. And then there was only one IT person left to do the job of 3, leaving the department well behind their performance schedule. That's a problem. If it's true, you can correct me. Again, it's not a give and take. It's not the Adam Bierman talking to the council moment, so we can maybe continuing conversation. So these are my questions, and again, and kudos to Planet Princeton. Sometimes you want freedom from the press. Sometimes we have freedom of the press. It's always a tension, but the Fourth Estate, I think, has been doing a pretty good job on this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I can't necessarily address your questions one by one, but I'll. Well, that's okay. No, I think you put some stuff out there that I want to respond to, and then I might ask Mr. DeShield to respond to some of it too. So, our priorities in addressing the situation are multiple. So, one priority is to clean up the site. And we've hired a professional, it's called an LSRP, licensed site remediation professional. It's someone who we hired and have experience with. We brought them in as an independent person for the Avalon Bay project, and he was extremely thorough on that site. And so we brought him in, and he's started his work at the River Road facility, and we were going to do this as part of reports, but I can ask Mr. DeShield to give us an update on where the cleanup activity is on that. Our second priority is to protect the taxpayers by doing our best to hold those responsible for any of the problems up at River Road, to account for that. And we also have insurance, and we've been in contact with our insurance company on this, and Mr. DeShield can also give a report on that. The third is we want to be supporting the investigation by the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office, and that's very important to everybody up here on council, and I think it's also important to the community. So we want to make sure, as we're doing the cleanup, as we're moving forward on all these other steps, that we don't step on the investigation or do anything to impede the ability of the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office to seek justice for the municipality. Fourthly, we want to be as open and transparent with the public as possible during this process, even though that's challenging because we are in, there is this investigation going on, and the town is also involved with litigation with some of the companies that have been involved. So we have put up an update on the municipal website as of last Friday, where people can go, and we will be continuing to update that for people who are interested. Right now it gives some background on the River Road site, on the former landfill that was there, on the solar site, what's been done over the past several decades up there. But we encourage folks to go there for more information. We are in the process of looking at the Public Works Department, Infrastructure and Operations. Right now, we have the sewer operating division reporting through Public Works. And we have also been benefiting from help and support from neighboring municipalities and their sewer operations. And before we rush into anything, I think this is an opportunity for us to take a moment and think about how we want this department structured as we move forward. So there's an opportunity here potentially for interlocal shared services on sewer operations. This might be a moment where we can do that more easily. So we're taking a look at that, what that might involve. Before we go back and fill all the positions, especially in upper management at Public Works, we're taking a look at what's the ideal structure for that department moving forward. And so whatever we do, we don't want to rush into something that then permanently binds the municipality for decades. We want to be mindful, make sure that we have the support there. Sometimes that might be bringing in temporary consultants. That's certainly what we did with IT. Before filling in the positions, we just want to be smart about it and take our time and make sure we're making the best choices for the municipality. Because when you hire somebody, that's often a 20, 30-year commitment. So we just want to be smart about it. And I'll turn it over to Mark to address where we are with the cleanup on the site and also the insurance company and anything else you'd like to add.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Just to give you an update of where we are in terms of the cleanup efforts at the SOC site. As you indicated, we've hired an LSRP, the Whitman Associates. They are currently performing preliminary environmental assessments. They're also going to remove the asbestos that are in containers at the facility at this time. First thing they did to date, the LSRP has gone out to the site. They've done an initial inspection of the piles of material that are on the site to determine where they lie in relationship to the wetlands in the area. They went out with DEP to actually do that inspection. They're waiting for DEP to provide us with some additional information in terms of whether the materials have encroached the wetland. We don't know that at this point. In addition, they made a preliminary plan for testing on the site. The LSRP will be going out to the site. One of the things we have to recognize is because there is an investigation, the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office, the site is locked down at this time, which is taking additional time for the LSRP to have access to the site. But he has scheduled to go onto the site about July 29th, and that's when they'll do the initial survey work. And what the survey work will do, they'll take initial surveys. It'll allow them to begin to do the soil sampling in the area to determine, what is the material that actually has been dumped at the site. They've already have a preliminary plan for they'll test that material, determine what it is, and then come back to us for a remediation plan for the facility. In addition, I just wanted to talk about the staffing and staffing adjustment, and not to repeat what the mayor said, we are taking a close look at the organization so that we can make changes. We want to take our time in doing that. In the interim, we are not only the staff is now working through DPW at this time and the supervisors at DPW. We are also getting additional support from our engineering department. In fact, we have employees who have been former members of the SOC, who are engineers, who are assisting us with this process. We have got assistance from outside entities, and we're also looking at all other resources that we can have in the interim to ensure the day-to-day operations continue, all of the daily maintenance of the sewer lines and regular maintenance of our pump stations are continuing as we move forward, and we will be developing that plan. One thing that we also did, we do have, fortunately, we actually had a separate environmental insurance policy. We have made that claim to the insurance company. They are now working with us as we move through this process. Right now, the limit on that policy gives us at least $1 million in coverage for any rehabilitation or remediation of that site. We continue, this is a serious issue for us, and we continue to monitor the site and continue to work through this process.
Is that the report? We were talking about reporting on this, so are we just kind of covering everything right now? Okay. Another thing that I wanted to, I think the mayor forgot about was that we are also adding a new reporting mechanism for employees, an anonymous reporting mechanism, to both an internal reporting mechanism, and we're looking into doing an external that's handled by an external party that makes sure that everything is completely anonymous for anyone who might worry about it.
That's good. I didn't know about that. I just wanted to address one aspect of what Adam said. I can say that Oh, I am close. Okay. I wanted to address one aspect of what Adam said, which is part of my introduction to council. I did take a tour of River Road, and for someone who doesn't know what they're looking at, it would just be impossible. I mean, I don't know how representative I am, but nothing looked suspicious to me going out there in February. And I think you would have to really know what you were looking at. So I don't think it's something the layperson can go out, look around, and say, oh, this is a problem. So I think it does require someone with some expertise to identify that there is an issue. And just the other thing I'll add is that there are members of council who are assigned to the Sewer Operating Committee, who are assigned to the Department of Public Works, who do regularly go to those meetings and report about what's going on. So in that sense, people are, filling the functions that they're supposed to fill, but things have to be brought up for them to be aware of it. We don't have like an independent investigative arm that goes out and.
I appreciate all that about what you can see, but again, I'm just saying as a layperson outside the council, I was hearing things about this 2 years ago. Not that I was investigating it, but if I was hearing about it and talking to people and hearing, things from the street, I don't want to be Trumpian, how Trump always goes, I hear things, but they kept on hearing that, and could be true, people taking gasoline that they shouldn't take, trucks going in at night, someone has a drug problem. It's a small town still. And I just don't get how you all...
And did you report any of what you were hearing to anyone in the administration or on council?
Oh, it's coming back to me now. No.
No, I'm just asking the question.
We're not going to get in a back and forth here.
Well, because I will go back and forth quickly. No, I didn't, because, it's hard to validate. And I really thought, well, they're here, they're on the ground level. They would find out.
Okay.
And then it turned out to be true. But again, we don't want, like you said, Tim, I love you still, and we don't have to go back and forth.
Okay, Kate, you're next. Okay.
I just
Kate,
want
did you want to speak?
I want to add one thing while we're on this topic, which has to do with some reporting that I read about the behavior of one of Princeton's attorneys in terms of discouraging reporters from being in the room during a court proceeding, and I was very distressed by that, so I reached out to our counsel on that, and it turns out not to be true, but I just wanted to get a brief statement on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman. I was equally distressed when I heard about those accusations because they're completely false. I mean, at no time would anyone in my office, myself included, try to have anyone removed from the courtroom, least of all a reporter. Courtrooms are open to the public, and it's vital that reporters be there when there are issues of public importance, and this was an issue of extreme public importance. So I was very upset by that, and I appreciate your bringing it up. I mean, as you know, I also sent you guys a pretty detailed email. You should feel free to do whatever you'd like with that email. But yes, thank you. And then also to Mr. Bierman's question, I was admitted in 1996. I've been practicing ever since.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would recommend that we have the email that Trishka sent us earlier today put up as part of correspondence in the minutes from the agenda for tonight. Okay, Ms. Warren, your turn. It's not picking you up.
I know it's late, but this is very important to me. I did send some pictures of sidewalks downtown. We're talking about the core of the borough. So we're talking on a walk from Moore Street to Jefferson Road, strictly on the north side of Nassau Street. The sidewalks are abominable. Cracks, holes, missing pieces of concrete, curbs missing. I actually fell today in front of the flower store closest to Moore Street and went into the store. I was embarrassed that I fell, but I did go into one of the big gullies there on the sidewalk and just asked, if you own the building, would you please repair your sidewalk? If you don't own the building, would you kindly call your landlord and report that you have a dangerous condition out there? I know that I believe it was in 2018 you passed a resolution, or there's an ordinance, it's a resolution that talks about sidewalk care and repair and whose responsibility it is. So it is the responsibility of the landowner adjacent to the sidewalk. But my question is this: when the sidewalks are in such disrepair, first of all, whose responsibility is it on staff? And I would think Public Works would be have jurisdiction on the sidewalks. So giving the Public Works more work at this time for the SOC certainly is not a good idea, because in my opinion, they're not doing what they should be doing just generally. So trying to find out whose responsibility is, I can't find those things online. I can find your organizational structure as to who's supervisor and who reports to whom, but there's nowhere that talks about the daily operations of those departments and whose responsibility is it. So is there an annual audit that's done by Public Works, for instance, that someone gets out of a vehicle and actually walks the streets and sidewalks, notes properties that may have deficiencies in front, and knocks on the door and says, you know, there's an ordinance, you're required to take care of this. If you don't, we'll take care of it and we'll bill you for it, and perhaps there's a fine on top of that, although I don't believe there's a fine. So I'm very, very concerned that not only individuals are at risk, like myself and all of you, but also the municipality as a whole, because I do believe ultimately the municipality will be responsible when someone gets hurt, because you are supposed to know that the sidewalks are in disrepair, and you are supposed to have them either remediated by the property owner or by the municipality. So I think it's a huge liability and a huge risk. And I urge you to please, this is a very important issue. And it's just not Nassau Street. You know, I did see there was a terrible sidewalk condition next to the cemetery. So outside of the public library. And just last week, after I posted my pictures on Facebook, someone came and filled that in with blacktop. I'm assuming it was the church. I'm not sure. The church who owns the cemetery. So I'm asking you to please make that a priority. Please do that. And if you can help me understand where I can find whose responsibilities, the sort of day-to-day responsibilities of the Public Works Department, who's held responsible. I would think it would be the supervisor telling his workers, you know, every 6 months you need to get out of the trucks, you need to walk town, or things like that. I don't see it anywhere on the website. So I thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I would say that when residents see problems, Access Princeton's actually a great tool for us and helps the staff be more efficient, because if something gets called in, they have to go out, look at it, measure it, go back, and then send out a crew. Oftentimes, if there's a picture that's sent in through Access Princeton, it saves that step. And it just helps them with a map of where all the issues are. So whether it's potholes or issues with the sidewalk, it's a really great tool that the municipality has, and you can help us. It's not, we actually really appreciate when people send in photos that way, because it helps us do a better job. So I want to thank you for the photos that you took, and your points are well taken too. It's important part of our infrastructure. So thank you.
Mayor, can I just ask a quick question? When someone does report something through Access Princeton, is there some time frame at which it's responded to, or is that perhaps a better question for Mr. DeShiel?
I mean, usually you'll get something back pretty quickly that says we received your issue.
But I meant how
And
long
then
before-
it's assigned to somebody, and you'll see
Okay.
who it's assigned to, and then you'll get emails as it works its way through. And it sort of depends on what the problem is and also what time of year it is. So there might be, like, for example, a pothole that it's either not the time to fill it in because it's the middle of winter, or it'll be like a temporary patch, and then there'll be, so it sort of depends on the issue.
Thank you.
That's a very quick question. If I were to send those pictures with the addresses, would they be, because they're sidewalks, would someone actually go and knock on those doors of those businesses and have those sidewalks repaired? Because
We'd actually
I'll
send
go
notices
back,
out to those
I will
people.
definitely go back on the street and mark, I will take the picture of the building and the sidewalk.
Yeah, that would be great. And the other thing is, the great thing about technology now is when you take it through the Access Princeton app, your phone knows where you are, so you don't have to even type in the address.
Oh, that's great. That's what I'll
Big
do.
Brother is help in that case. Yeah.
I mean, it's an embarrassment, to tell you the truth, so thank you.
Liz, you're referring to See Click Fix or a different app? Is there another?
Well, it's called Access Princeton.
Oh.
But it's on the See Click Fix platform.
I see.
Yeah. It's our yeah.
Mayor, first of all, Kate, sorry for your injury. I hope you're recovering well. And the person on council who I know knows more about sidewalks than anyone is Jenny. So the issue of who's responsible for repairing sidewalks in commercial as opposed to residential districts, can you enlighten us a little bit about that?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say I'm not sure. I mean, I don't really know if there's a difference between commercial. There isn't. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the municipality is responsible for repairs that are caused by trees. And so a lot of the problems are the municipalities. But if they're not, if it's the adjacent homeowner, it's the adjacent homeowner. We do have staff people that go out and periodically walk and find things, but it's not super systematic, and it's not, it doesn't cover everything, obviously, since the sidewalks are in bad shape. Yeah, that's the adjacent property owner. So I was going, before Liz said something, I was going to suggest Access Princeton, because that is a really good thing. And we also have, a couple times a year, we get I think now we have a subcontractor who has a grinding machine and goes out and repairs. And so we do try to keep it up, but we aren't keeping up. And Nassau Street is, in particular, probably needs new sidewalks everywhere. So, and I believe we're on a schedule for redoing the whole thing, and I think including the sidewalks. But I forget when it is. It might be like, does anybody know anything about that?
Well, I think we're hoping to get some funding for it. But we have the design plan, so we're ready to go. It's a big project, and I think the idea would be to do it in sections, but we don't want to start with a section. The first thing we wanted to do is make sure we had a uniform design, so you don't sort of change your mind with how it's going to look as you move down the street. Correct. Right. So the first part of it is actually going to be put in with the Bank Street project. So Bank Street is, that road is getting reconstructed. They're working on the underground portion right now. But where it meets Nassau Street, there is going to be a raised sidewalk there. So as you come along Nassau Street, there won't be a curb as a pedestrian. So you won't step down as you cross Bank Street. You'll stay up high. And if you're a car going from Nassau Street onto Bank Street, you'll have to go up and over. So, and that's the suggested treatment for a couple of those sort of smaller, almost like alley-like streets off of Nassau, which should help with safety and pedestrian safety. And it's, I think, an attractive approach too. So people will see the first part of the design there. And then as we get funding, we'll do more and more. But, I think we can't wait for that. I think that's a replacement process, not a repair process. And you've made a very compelling case that we need to get on with the repair process if, we can't wait to do the replacement.
I also wanted to add that there is a committee working on walkways, we're calling them, and one of the projects is to put out a fact sheet about sidewalks. And so I'm glad you asked the questions, but and that's what we're talking about addressing. Who takes care of the sidewalks? When do they get replaced? Who pays for everything? What to do if you see a sidewalk that it looks dangerous.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to anything that's not already on the agenda? All right, seeing no one, I'll close public comment. Thank you. And we'll move on to the ordinance introduction for tonight, which is Ordinance 2019-30, an ordinance by the Municipality of Princeton pursuant to NJSA 40A 12-1, authorizing a license agreement for Block 27.02, Lot 76, Princeton Tax Map, with DWM Holdings Incorporated, DBA Christine's, for 24 seats for outside dining on the Heinz Plaza. And I don't know if we need any explanation for this ordinance. Essentially, it's to allow for outdoor seating at the new restaurant. Jack Morrison is here. This will be a new restaurant next to Witherspoon Grill on Heinz Plaza, and we'll extend the outdoor seating there.
I'll move it.
It's been
Second.
moved by Ms. Kremler and seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Is there anybody who'd like to speak? Welcome.
I'm Lisa Seriasol. I'm a Princeton resident, but I'm also the chair of the Bicycle Advisory Committee. And I wanted to bring to the attention of council that as we work to try to increase the amount of bike parking around town, one of the frequent locations that we hear about that needs more parking spaces for bikes is Heinz Plaza. So I'm pleased to hear about the new restaurant that's coming and the cafe seating that is part of what makes Princeton so unique in our area with our walkable, bikeable downtown. But I was wondering if there could be an element of increasing bike parking on the plaza, because I know for myself and my husband, we would love to be able to ride our bikes downtown, find places to park our bikes, and have a coffee or whatever at Christine's.
Great, thank you. So there's actually a companion ordinance to this that will be on a subsequent agenda that calls for bike parking. There's a little sort of alleyway that comes off of Spring Street.
By Hickson's?
Yes, to the side of that. So there's the garage entrance, and then it's sort of more against the Chuck side as you come through. And there's a plan for having some additional bike parking there. But hopefully it's something that the bike committee will take a look at and bring those recommendations to council, because Heinz Plaza is one of those sort of easier areas to accommodate more bikes in certain areas. We're in control of it, and so let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and also we have the bike corral that's probably coming back in the spring. Does that?
It's there now.
Oh, it's there now still.
There is
Oh,
one.
Okay.
Yeah, but there are some more that I think are intended to come. They're probably in the works.
Yeah, unfortunately, Deanna's not here, but there's certain spots where we had to pull away the parking from the intersections, the crosswalks, to allow for sight lines, and it allows for some extra space for bike parking.
Great.
So I can't remember exactly where they are either, but
All I know is that whenever I go by the corral or even the parking inside the Spring Street garage, it's always full.
Right.
So,
Well, that's a good
Not
sign.
to mention what's already been established by the library.
Right.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other comments about the introduction? And if not, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Kremiller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
And the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing for this ordinance will be on August 5th, 2019. And now we'll go back to the regular order of the agenda with reports. And our first report is on where we are with the food waste program. So as many of you know, we had received a Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge grant for this program, and one of the things we did with that grant was look at what can we do to make this program work better. And one of the ideas we are working on is how do you make this more sustainable and more affordable. And what we came up with was to try to bring the processing facility closer to our community, so that the material we're composting, we have more of a sense of it keeping in the community and reusing it to increase the fertility of our soils. We know from some of the meetings we've had since we've had to suspend the program how much community interest there is still in the program, so that's been a really great sign. And we do have a really potentially exciting opportunity, and I want to turn it over to Mr. DeShield to talk about what that is, to talk about what would be required of council to move forward with it, and just to get a sense of council where we are and if there's interest.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to give some background, just to let council know, out of the lessons that we've learned kind of going through the 9-month process of researching, testing related to the Bloomberg project for the solid waste, we really recognize the limitations that we have in conventional mechanisms that we use for the collection and processing of solid waste. Unfortunately, there really is a limited number of ways in which we can, as local government, in terms of alternatives we can use to haul and process solid waste. The most traditional and conventional way is to go out and seek bids from a conventional waste hauler, like we currently do with waste management. That process, we've learned, has not been successful. We've had, the outcomes have not been satisfactory for us. And as part of that process, we kind of looked at what are the other alternatives out there that we can kind of look at. After months of, we've kind of done some research through Bloomberg, talking with NJDEP, and then having a number of follow-up meetings, we came to the conclusion that the best way to kind of deal with this is to seek to develop our own kind of collection and processing process. To that end, what we've learned is that what we need to create is probably a public-private partnership. And what a public-private partnership will provide us is really the best of both worlds. The advantages that we can get from a public entity and those from a private. So what we're proposing to do is to create this public-private partnership that would use, for example, the municipality would provide the hauling. And what that does, the advantages that would give us are really twofold. One being, it eliminates the need to go out for bids and use our traditional haulers. We've gone through that process, and what that has shown us is you get the low bid, and the service we receive has not been satisfactory. In addition to that, if we become the hauler, we can really control that process a lot more. One of the biggest issues that we've had with the current hauler is just the control and the level of service that the provider is providing us. If we have that control, we can really make that process a lot better by us doing the hauling. It also reduces some of the regulatory requirements in terms of the hauling. And then we can use the best from the private sector with the innovations the private sector has, the flexibility that they have. We really can see that private, kind of a private entity really providing the processing part of this, where they would need expertise in that area versus us doing. So what we see is the town actually hauling the materials and then bringing in a private contractor to kind of be that processor for us, providing both processing of the material and actually finding a place for that material to actually go. So that's what we see as kind of the best alternative moving forward. I mean, it's recently we've been able to, there's a unique opportunity we have. We have been in discussions with MetLife Stadium. They have a brome digester, food digester, which they have used for a number of years. They are no longer using it, and they're willing to donate it to the municipality for use. We've had an opportunity to go out to the site, actually inspect the digester. We've also had Brome, the actual company itself, go out, take a look at it, see if it's what type of shape it's in. They have indicated it's in good shape. The only issue with the digester itself, there are some areas where there is some rust. There's some dents from moving the actual digester back and forth that need to be repaired. So in our discussions with MetLife, they're willing to donate it, but what we would need to do is to make the repairs, pay for the transportation, disassembly, and moving of the actual digester. That would require an investment on our side of about $20,000 all in for all transportation and repair of that facilities. So what I'm looking for council tonight is that something that the council is interested in pursuing? If so, what staff will do for the next meeting is, one, prepare a resolution necessary for taking in the donation, and also a resolution to authorize Brome to actually, not Brome, but actually MetLife to make the repairs on the facility to take that in, and then provide the council with a full kind of presentation of what it would look like kind of moving forward with this public-private partnership. So really what I'm saying tonight is this something that the council is interested in? If so, we can move forward and bring that to you on the meeting of the 5th.
And just to add to Mark's report, we've been in discussions with MetLife for a while. I know people have heard about this donation, and MetLife has basically said, you need to make a decision in the next few weeks. So that's why it's coming to council tonight in sort of this abbreviated form. I would say that one thing that would be helpful to have at the next council meeting is an analysis of the hauling, which I know has been done. This is something that the municipality has been working on for the past several months, of what it would look like to bring this service in-house and what the costs are of internally hauling the material. If people remember that what precipitated ending or suspending our previous curbside composting program was that, number one, there were issues with the hauling, but then when we went out to bid, the prices essentially doubled, and we only received one bid from the hauler we were having issues with, and at that point, the program became just, it was too hard to justify the cost of it. And so with the internal hauling, we can go back to essentially the costs that we had before we went out to bid. But I think it would be helpful for both the council and the public to see those figures before we make the investment. Even though it's a donation, it's still $20,000 for the moving. And I think we'd be moving forward with the expectation that this program would be up and running soon. And so we want to make sure that people are comfortable with the plans for those. Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, so my recollection is that the more recent conversations I had heard is we were going to try and do this entirely in-house versus the public-private partnership. I think, reading between the lines, I understand why we're going in the direction of a public-private partnership, because the location where we were expecting to put the digester was at the River Road facility, and since that's sort of on lockdown for the time being, it doesn't make sense at this point. But I guess the question is, do we have a private partner who's interested, or more than one? Do we have any idea what kind of a location they would envision for siting the digester?
What we envision, just from our conversations, is a local farm. We do know that there are people interested in doing that type of activity. What we will do is provide some type of either an RFQ, an RFP that we would send out and invite people, but we know there is an interest.
Thank you. I also have a couple. Sure. Okay. I also have a couple of questions. echoing what Mayor Lempert said, I'd really like to see a breakdown of the finances. And then in terms of the public-private partnership, the public part is we repair the digester. And well, just a quick technical question. Doesn't it make sense to move the digester first and then do any repairs in case there's some damage in the process of transport? And then if there is some damage, that can be then done at once, but not my forte, but just seemed to make sense. So the public part is we'll do the pickup ourselves. We'll provide the digester to a farm. And the private part is they will take our food waste and turn it into something that they will sell or use in some way. But their part is just, the private part is just to be a site for the food waste and to accept, for the composter and to accept it.
They would accept it, process it, and also find a way to use it,
Okay.
either on their site or some other location.
But we would not expect any compensation for the food waste that we're delivering. We would give that to them and they would make use of it.
I'm
No,
not
if
following
they're
your
if they're
question.
generating
answer that?
fertilizer and potentially selling it, that's their part of. They would gain the profit from that if they.
So there may be, because there's a processing fee, and that's some things that we would have to work out in terms of what that relationship would look like. The municipality may have to pay some cost of the actual disposal, just as we do now. We pay, a fee to have that disposed of. So that'll be part of the process of whatever contract we have with the private entity.
Okay. The other question is about enforcement, and you said, and I think Mayor Lempert said, it would also be easier if that's done in-house, because I think a big part, whether we're talking about recycling or compost, is people don't know what the rules are, and so I think it's crucial, if we're going to do this in-house, that we have people who are willing to slip, put a sticker on a compost bucket and say, rejected, here's what you did wrong, and here's how you can correct it. Because otherwise we'll get all kinds of things in there that are not acceptable. So is that going to...
Actually, the advantage of actually us doing the hauling, we
Okay.
control that whole process. It's one of the kind of frustrations we had with the current vendor,
Okay.
is they really didn't provide that service. If we have our employees, we have complete control over that process.
But you have to find employees who are willing to do it. It's not going to be popular.
That's going to be their job.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
I just had a question regarding, if I remember correctly, previously the composting program was an opt-in, so not every household
Correct.
participated. So is there, in order for this to be cost-effective for us to participate in this, is there a number of households that would be required to participate
There
in
is,
the
unfortunately, I
program?
don't have I don't have in front of me the analysis that we did in terms of the cost. But basically what we looked at is at the current level that the program is now, it would be cost effective if we can keep it at the level or slightly above that level, I believe is the answer to your question.
I just want to say the same thing I think probably everyone is saying. Is I support this effort, and I think it's exciting, but we have to see the numbers first.
And I think it's important, and we're not looking for council to actually make a decision. I just wanted to know, is it worth making the effort to kind of put this together to put before council?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And now I'll move on to council. What's that? Oh, sure. Resolution number 4 on Brickhouse Road? Oh, sure. Okay. Is there
I
a
move to
motion
I move
to
to-
amend,
Second.
amend the agenda to move up resolution number 4? Been moved by Ms. Crummler, seconded by Mr. Quinn to amend the agenda. All in favor of amending the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so next we'll take up Resolution 231, resolution authorizing the sale of an affordable housing unit, 427 Brickhouse Road, Block 9801, Lot 3427, in the amount of $56,970. Moved by Ms. Krummeller.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cohen. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Okay.
won't.
Yeah, we won't. Yeah.
We can move yours up too.
No, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I just say that is normally the kind of thing that is super routine, but we can't put it on the consent agenda because of the amount.
Oh, I understand that, but I want to be able to report that.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you for your diligence. All right.
1935.
For the, okay. Is there a motion? I'm sorry, because this is extra work for the clerk. I mean, I just feel like I can guarantee you it's on the consent agenda. So we can call you if there's like something crazy, but we're going to stay here. I feel like it's not, it's on, yeah. Okay, so I do want to go back up to reports, and I'll start on my right with Ms. Niedergang.
Thank you. I do have a few reports. From the Animal Control Officer, just wanted to report that planning for the fall-winter deer hunt has started. Bow and arrow hunting will occur again on the Butler Tract beginning in the fall. And that will continue through the fall, and I think the sharpshooters start in December. And last year, through the diligence of our animal control officer, we really had a great hunt. Apparently, it all depends on how well the site is prepared, and Jim Ferry really did a fabulous job doing that, and we'll hopefully do that again this year. From the Princeton Environmental Commission, I reported at the last council meeting that PEC had voted to approve a resolution urging the passage of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which is House Resolution 763. And I just wanted to provide a quick update that our Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman has signed on as a co-sponsor. A resolution supporting this proposal will be coming to council in the near future. From the health department, flu shots for food service workers are going to be offered during the summer and fall in an effort to protect our community from the upcoming flu season. You can imagine how bad it is if our food handlers are coming to work with the flu, so it's really a benefit to the entire community. The health educator and the health officer have conducted a literature review of this, and the benefits of doing this kind of program are really clear. And also from the health department has started work on its strategic plan for 2020 to 2025, and the Board of Health has been reviewing and commenting on this plan. From the Public Transit Committee, Public Transit is starting to meet to talk about some improvements to the Dinky Station, and also to participate in discussions on the Alexander Road closing coming up in November. The Transit Communications Task Force has distributed its new transit map and will soon be putting up Transit Princeton signs at all the current freebie stops, emphasizing the connections to Tiger Transit and other methods of public transit. At the last public transit meeting, some university students working with former Mayor Yaina Moore and Professor Alan Kornhauser at Princeton discussed a plan for a community-centered, affordable, and on-demand mobility network for Princeton, which would be based on a rideshare plan with a small van. And we'll be talking more to them about this proposal going forward. And finally, Shade Tree. The Shade Tree Commission is working on revising the tree protection ordinance. A new version of that will be reviewed by the committee this week and hopefully will find its way to council in the near future. And Shade Tree has also been working on a protocol for tree plantings in honor of or in memory of individuals, and that also is a continuing focus of discussion. And that's what I have.
I have 3 brief reports. The Bicycle Advisory Committee is hard at work preparing a presentation to Council, which will be given at our next meeting, August 5th, describing the committee's current initiatives and identifying areas where Council action will be needed to move these initiatives forward. Through the good efforts of Sustainable Princeton, Department of Public Works has received a draft contract agreement with a group called Curb My Clutter. They recycle electronics and textiles, providing scheduled curbside pickup as requested by residents. Most materials are recycled free of charge, although there are fees associated with recycling CRT monitors, oversized TVs, and microwaves. The agreement includes a profit-sharing arrangement by which the municipality receives 10% of net proceeds from the sale of recycled materials to reprocessors. And the Senior Resource Center has convened a committee to complete an application to update our age-friendly community status. Princeton was the first certified age-friendly community in New Jersey. The committee has largely completed their work, and PSRC has submitted a draft of the application for final review prior to submission.
I was going to report on the work of the Permit Parking Task Force, but in the interest of time, I think I'll submit it in writing. And just one thing that I'll say about it is that we are, today we decided we're going to be putting together, hosting a community meeting in early September to solicit input from the various neighborhoods, businesses, and interested individuals.
Great. I have a few reports, and I'll try to be quick. The first is that the library is currently looking for a new executive director. They've advertised for the position, and assuming the applications come back strong, there could be a new library director appointed in September, October. And there's several groups that are brainstorming right now on the Alexander Bridge closing that will be happening in November. There's a lot of creative ideas from the local business community, and I know the transit committee is working on it too. But it's certainly something we want to start getting the word out about to employers and to residents to start making a plan for November through April, but to make sure that plan includes coming into Princeton still and shopping and dining here. So we're reaching out to New Jersey Transit about making sure that there's enough dinky service and thinking about ways to make even the dinky ride an event in and of itself, like creating a Polar Express during the holiday season. But, you know, it is going to be an impact on the community, so we want to try to get ahead of it. And there will be a stakeholder meeting that's being planned right now with New Jersey DOT in the beginning of August. And then 2 reports from Deanna Stockton. On Monday, July 29th, Mercer County will begin milling and resurfacing of River Road between Princeton-Kingston Road and the county border north of the sewer plant. This work will be done from 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. and traffic will be detoured. Work is anticipated to take approximately 1 week. Also during the week of July 29th, PSE&G Gas will begin gas main and services replacement on Harrison Street between Hartley Avenue and Nassau Street. This work will be done from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and traffic will be detoured. Work is anticipated to take 3 weeks. And are there any staff reports?
Yes, Mayor. Just want to give an update on the audio-visual kind of update. As you know, currently we are broadcasting the council meeting and planning board meetings live. We do have an issue with the audiovisual equipment. There is a malfunction in the system, which does not allow us to record both the audio and visual together. So we're recording them separately, and then we have to sync them in order to post them online. So it's taking some time before the actual videos get online, are placed online. What we are doing in the meantime, we have troubleshooted. We've had some consultants come out and troubleshoot the system. To do the repairs is quite expensive, so we're looking at a number of alternative actions. We actually have 2 vendors coming out to take a look, one on July 31st and then one on August 7th, and then we'll be providing an update on recommendations to kind of move forward to rectify the situation with the audio. The other thing I wanted to talk about this evening is Passport. As you're aware, we renegotiated the convenience fees for Passport. The contract calls for a 25-cent convenience fee for anyone using the app. That has actually gone into place. Council some time ago actually passed a contract amendment. They're also supposed to change the wallet convenience fee from 35 cents to 20 cents. Unfortunately, they have to do some engineering to make that happen. So what they were able to do for us at this point is it has been dropped to 25 cents on the wallet. They're now currently in the process of engineering the wallet feature to allow it to drop down to 20 cents. As soon as that's available, I will advise council and the public when that is available. And then the final piece is with the closure of River Road and discussions with both mayors and some members of council, making a recommendation that the convenience center, that we actually close the convenience center at this time, pretty much since residents will be able to put those materials that they usually would take to the convenience center at the curbside and have it picked up there. So my recommendation is that the convenience center Saturday hours are now, we stop the Saturday hours at the convenience center until further notice.
I think there were some Monday hours too.
Monday, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so reports have concluded. I wanted to go to correspondence about a new event in town called Fest-Tomato, scheduled for September 7th, 2019, and this looks to be a tasty new event. Was there a request here for
just
any
to
sort
get a
of
consensus from council that they can hold this?
Okay. So is there a consensus from council
Yes.
that would allow for the holding of this? All right, sounds like there's
Absolutely.
nodding heads. Yes. Okay. We will, most of us will probably be there as well. Okay, and next we come to our ordinance public hearings. The first is ordinance 2019-28, which is actually, the public hearing for this ordinance is going to be carried to September 9th, 2019. Do I still need to open up the public hearing for tonight? All right, it's going to be held till September 9th. And next is ordinance 2019-32, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning the Princeton Police Department and amending the code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. We discussed this ordinance at the time of introduction, and it has to do with restructuring some of the positions to better reflect the department as it is now post-consolidation.
I'll move it.
It's moved by Ms. Krummeller.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Fraga. Any discussion or questions? Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Oh, sorry, don't do that yet. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. I'm sorry. I told you I had some coffee before the meeting, so I think it's kicking in again. All right, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Kremiller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Okay, and the ordinance passes, so thank you. It passes unanimously. Next, we come to resolutions, and the first is 19228, resolution approving a professional services agreement to T&M Associates for engineering design and plan preparation, corrective measures, Princeton Sanitary Landfill, in an amount not to exceed $22,245. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Quinn. Any questions or comments? Ms. Niedergang?
Yeah, from having some discussions about this, it seems that this kind of upkeep at the former landfill is just a standard process that we've been doing since the 1980s or whenever the landfill was closed. And I wonder if maybe Mr. DeShields could just say a few more words about that.
Sure. The landfill was closed in around 1980 sometime. As part of the process of closing a landfill, there are DEP regulations that call for an annual engineering inspection of the landfill. And what the engineering inspection does, it looks at different aspects of maintenance programs that include things like mowing, seeding, repair of areas of erosion, maintenance of the runoff controls at the site. So since that time, there is an annual inspection that occurs by an engineer. They identify corrective actions. They work with DEP in terms of what those corrective actions are, and we didn't take the necessary steps for correction. In this case, we did the annual inspection for 2018, and with DEP, they identified some areas that needed additional design work, in particular with some of the stormwater runoff throughout the site. So what this proposal will do is to engineer and design some runoff stormwater controls on the site, and then go through all the application process necessary to have that approved by DEP or any other regulatory agency necessary to approve it.
Ms. Carmelo?
I just wanted, in case anybody's listening and reading it carefully, there's a letter in there that references a meeting that took place on February 26th, and so it's a little bit confusing because it's like, wait a minute, why are we contracting with someone to meet on February 26th of 2019? And apparently, the consultant already they did attend that meeting, so I just wanted to point that out.
There was a meeting in February of 2019 in which they attended the meeting prior to actually this contract being issued, and what they're just looking for payment for attending that meeting included in this contract.
Okay. All right, so the resolution has been moved and seconded. If there's no more questions or comments, I'd like to call the vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Okay, resolution passes unanimously. Next is Resolution 19229, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Cherry Hill Winter Ford, State of New Jersey contract A88758 T2101 for a 2019 Ford 350 extended cab maintenance vehicle in the amount of $37,956 for use by the Recreation Department. Is there
I'll
a motion moved by Ms. Krumiller? Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any questions or discussion? Ms. Niedergang?
Just one question. I'm wondering, in light of the climate action plan that was presented to us tonight, how much concerns like fuel efficiency and other factors like that. I know there are many other things that will get weighted into the purchase of a vehicle, and I did a little poking around today, and apparently hybrid trucks of that size are not yet really a real thing, although that may change in the next year or two. But I'm wondering, is that something that gets thought about? If there are two trucks that are similar, do we buy the one that has better fuel efficiency as a matter of course, or?
Actually, I'm not sure if it was in this year's or last year's contract that we work with Sustainable Princeton. One of the things that we looked at is trying to identify those vehicles that are available for us that meet the specifications, like the heavy-duty trucks. And I know they've done that analysis, and they weren't a lot in that area, but they have identified where we can actually use those types of vehicles for other cases. We work closely with them, and if things become available that we can use, we would definitely look to a more energy-efficient vehicle.
Thank you.
And of previous council, I know that we've passed a resolution or something like that that required us to do that. So, I mean, I don't know if everybody's aware of it still, but we have in the past said we want to look at the most fuel efficient possible wherever practicable.
Okay. I think, has this been moved and seconded? I believe it has. All right. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And next is 19230, resolution authorizing the award of a capital purchase to SunGuard Mid-Atlantic LLC for a 40 by 50 by 9 shade cover for Smoyer Park Playground in the amount of $20,243 for the use by the Recreation Department. Is
So
there
moved.
Moved by Ms.
Second.
Kremler, seconded by Mr. Quinn. Any questions or discussion on this one? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by a single vote. Are there any items anyone would like removed from the consent agenda?
I think, were we going to, with the dog?
Right, do you want to, let's hold that till the
Yes.
next meeting when we have, okay, so let's pull that one for the next meeting. Are
Can I
there,
ask for comments on, I mean, does he want to say something?
I don't think so. It's the release of a performance escrow. So,
234.
it's number 3.
Establishment.
Yeah. Are there any other items anyone would like removed from the consent agenda? Okay, so is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus the third item?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda passes unanimously. And then I just want to get a sense from folks, we had one item from closed session. Do people want to stay and finish discussing that briefly, or do people want to go home?
I think, let's get the written memo.
I'm happy to stay, but I'll go with whatever the majority is saying.
Might as well what, stay?
Yeah.
All right, so is there a motion to move back into closed
Second.
session?
Oh, so moved. Sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we'll move back into closed session.